Novel name, The Strange Summoner's Path. Cain had been waiting for this day ever since he was reborn into this world 10 years ago. Unlike in his original world, in this world, a select number of individuals could awaken an affinity for and bind with certain spiritual creatures. Today is the day he would find out if he had what it takes to become a beast tamer. Otherwise, he'd have to be satisfied with a life of mediocrity as an ordinary person. There's no way, Cain thought. There's no way I'd be brought to this world, bound to a system, and not have any affinity. If anything, as a transmigrator I should have an epic affinity like to dragons, or an epic elemental affinity like space or time. Hey system. Is there anything you can tell me? Unfortunately, the system was silent as always. He wouldn't even know it existed if it didn't announce its existence when he first woke up in this body. The only remaining evidence of its existence being a glowing egg floating in space that he could see whenever he closed his eyes. Hopefully, you activate once the affinity ceremony is over with. With that thought, Cain moved forward even more anxiously with the long line of other high school seniors. Huff. Looking around, some, like his best friend Bridge, looked like they would faint from the nervousness, while others, the legacies, appeared calm. Huff. The ability to bind spiritual creatures is partially hereditary. Since the legacy's parents were all beast tamers, they should also awaken an affinity, even if the quality is poor. Cain and Bridge on the other hand live together in the local orphanage. Whether either of them has even one parent with an affinity is a complete mystery. In fact, Bridge doesn't even know his real name, only named as such because that's where the orphanage director found him. Huff. Bridge, can you stop panting like a goddamn dog? We haven't even walked that far. Cain was finally fed up with trying to tune out the heavy breathing of the large baby-faced boy next to him. I can't help it, Cain, what if I don't have any affinity? My grades aren't as good as yours, so I can't try to enter a college through an academic major, and once we turn 18, the orphanage director might kick us out. Bridge looked at Cain with tears pooling in his eyes. Cain's heart immediately softened. After all, they were each other's closest thing to family. Really, how can someone with the body of a football player like you be such a crybaby? I'm sure you'll have an affinity. Probably not as cool as mine, but you definitely will. Bridge looked a little comforted by Cain's word. Despite being the same age, Cain had always seemed like a reliable older brother, and he's never steered him wrong before. What's football? You always say the strangest things. Do you really not remember anything before you entered the orphanage 10 years ago? Nope. Nothing. They continued walking forward in silence. Finally, they entered the doors of a large building similar to a cathedral, with intricate carvings of creatures similar to what existed on Earth, and completely new ones, all over the stone exterior. Above, there was a glass ceiling, allowing the starlight to come down and touch the figures of all the seated children. Congratulations, my students. Above was the principal of the local academy number 1200, Principal Waters. Obviously, whoever named the schools in this world has the same naming sense as Cain's orphanage director. This year we've had a record number of students achieve the required spiritual power to undergo the affinity ceremony and hopefully become beast tamers, he said with his bushy gray brows twitching constantly from joy. After all, the more of his students successfully awaken an affinity, the higher the school's funding will be next year. Along with his salary, most likely. Now, although not all of you will awaken an affinity, do not be disheartened. There are still many prestigious careers for non-beast tamers, pharmacists, blacksmiths, and above all the evolutionary planners. True. It'd be considered great if even a third of these students awaken an affinity. Which is why no matter how certain I feel I am to awaken an affinity, I still took all of my academic courses seriously. Thought Cain. Although, I have already experienced normal college life in an academic major, and it is not something I want to do a second time. The tiring labs, taking notes, being yelled at by my supervisor. No way I want to do that again. Especially not in a world as fascinating as this one foot. Now, the ceremony will begin shortly. Although, some of you may already know what to expect from your family members' past experiences. I hope you all will listen carefully. Cain and Bridge sat up straighter. They had absolutely nobody to tell them what the ceremony was like. The orphanage director was just an ordinary man whose spiritual power didn't even meet the requirements to enter the ceremony. From your first year at the academy, we had taught you the technique on how to collect spiritual power from the stars until your soul was fully saturated. While this first step is easily achieved by even children, the requirement to partake in the ceremony is to condense all of the gaseous spiritual power in your soul into a sphere, a star, that does not unravel without your conscious effort. This star will be the home for your first contract. The goal of the affinity ceremony is to mold this star into the most optimal environment for this contract. Once the ceremony begins, you will enter a space. If you possess an affinity, you will see its appearance in the form of an egg. Once this egg hatches, its form will reveal your affinity and fuse with your star, transforming it into an environment inhabitable by only a select number of creatures, those matching your affinity. Once you bind to your first contract, the star will further continue to grow and transform with your spirit creature to its most optimal habitat. Meaning that every individual star is unique, regardless of whether the contract species is the same. Now, some of you will have very narrow affinities, allowing you to only bind a small number of creatures. For example, 3 years ago we had a student whose affinity was to ice attribute goldfish, achieving only an F rating. There were some snickers, particularly from the legacies. Goldfish were a notoriously weak species, not to mention the student could only bind to an ice attribute mutant that could probably only cool down drinks for its beast tamer. However, at least this student awakened an affinity. Others may awaken affinities to whole elemental attributes or beast types or even multiple affinities. Just 2 nights ago at high school number 1011's affinity ceremony, a student achieved an S rating. After today, the next S rating in our great celestial empire, and the first in over a decade from our bright star city, may be one of you. At his words, several of the more confident students puffed their chests out with pride. Good luck. Kane thought. There's rarely more than 30 students with an S rating in a given year. I don't need an S rating, Bridge said shakily. All I need is a B, to have a shot at entering a top college's beast taming department. Getting a C or D rating to enter lower tier colleges would also be okay. I can't afford to be picky. You will, don't worry. Kane said, patting Bridge on the back. Trying to convey confidence he didn't feel into his voice. After all, although genetics are a major component on whether you can awaken an affinity, one's mentality is probably the next most important. Principal Waters continued, clear your mind, and you should instinctively be drawn towards your affinity in that empty space. This year is your best chance, with each additional attempt greatly decreasing your chances of awakening an affinity. Last year less than 10 repeat students in the entire empire awakened an affinity. After the third chance, the strain on your soul will not allow for a fourth try. Teachers, please join me on stage and we will begin the ceremony. While the teachers moved to the stage, the principal revealed a large statue of a humanoid creature with childish features, gills on its neck, and webbed fingers and toes. Strangely, it was shown playing an instrument similar to the violin. It was a creature Kane had never seen before in any of his textbooks. The teachers placed their hands on the statue while channeling their spiritual power. Engravings around the base of the statue lit up, prompting a beautiful melody to ring through the air. I see. So the spell of this creature is what makes the ceremony possible. Kane thought before sinking into darkness. Although an awakening rate of around 20 to 30% seems low, it is many times greater than the awakening rate before the empire was established and awakening ceremonies were conducted. Among millions of individuals, it would be considered lucky if even one could enter this space to awaken independently. Although such individuals would be considered the absolute best among the talents today. Probably even above the S rating given out nowadays. Astronomical talents at the level of the empire's 5 founders. Thankfully, the ceremony was developed after discovering a creature that possessed a skill able to forcefully drag individuals into this space, even if their talent was greatly lacking. Opening his eyes, Kane was distraught when he realized there was nothing around him. Calm down, Kane. Principal Waters said that I should feel a pull to where my affinity is located. Don't lose hope yet. Slowing his breathing, Kane decided to close his eyes while feeling for any kind of draw forward. There. Kane almost wanted to sprint towards the faint draw he felt in anxiety, but managed to remain calm and keep walking forward with his eyes closed so as to not lose the feeling. After all, it's not like there's anything harmful he could bump into around here. After what felt like an eternity, Kane finally felt the pull strong enough that it no longer required intense concentration to feel. He opened his eyes while dashing forward. Damn, this is all only in my head, but I feel as though I'm running a marathon. Just when will I see it? Finally, in the distance, Kane was able to see the first bit of light since he had entered. Rejuvenated, Kane sprinted as though he had been given a performance-enhancing drug. Finally he was before the most beautiful egg he had ever seen, and right next to it was another, and another, and another. A quick look around revealed at least a dozen eggs. Yes. I knew it. Kane wanted to jump and scream for joy. How could I, a transmigrator, with a system no less, live a life of mediocrity? I must be the greatest talent this world has ever seen. What are in these? Why are there so many? Is it a collection of all this world's mythical creatures? While imagining a beautiful future in which beautiful water sprites prepared his bath in morning, his breakfast prepared over his phoenix's fire, and then making a grand entrance to the college every morning on his dragon's back, Kane began shiver in ecstasy. I hope my real body doesn't have a nosebleed or some other kind of physical manifestation of all this excitement. Which should I absorb first? Will the first be a dragon? Ah, it doesn't matter, they're all mine anyway. And with that thought and shaking fingers, Kane reached towards the closest egg.
Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
Filled with anticipation, Kane placed his hand on the surface of the egg. It was cool and smooth to the touch. Strangely though, the moment contact was made his whole body felt as though an electric current was running through it. Yes. This feeling. The electrifying feeling of this world's strongest beast tamer. Crack. Fine lines began to appear on the surface of the egg. Crack crack. Come on. Come on. Come on my beautiful dragon. Crack. Beautiful water nymph come to me. Crack. Epic mythical creature of time and space, come to Papa. Crash. All of the eggshells fell away to reveal nothing. Huh. Kane's face stretched into a large grin froze. Come out little guy. Are you hiding? Kane looked around in puzzlement. Maybe you're super small. Like a fairy or something. Thinking so, he began to lift all of the eggshell pieces on the ground. Still nothing. Okay, I will figure out what is supposed to be in that one later, on to the next one I guess. Moving to the next closest egg, Kane stretched out his hand to the same electrifying feeling. Please be something good this time. Come on my beautiful majestic phoenix. Nothing. Again there was an empty egg. With a sinking feeling in his gut, Kane reached out to the third egg. Come on lion. King of the jungle. Nothing. He reached for the next egg. Come on elemental affinity. Any would do. Nothing. The next egg. Come on wolf affinity. Nothing. Come on cat affinity. Nothing. Ice goldfish affinity. Still nothing. While opening all of the eggs, Kane fell deeper and deeper into despair. Do I not actually possess any affinity? But that can't be true. People with no affinity just have an empty space. Why have affinity eggs if they're all empty? Is this some kind of joke? System. Help me. I'm in the process of awakening now, so activate and help. Tell me what's going on. Like always, the system gave Kane no help, no response. Nothing. Just like his affinity eggs. Falling to his knees, he was on the verge of tears. Suddenly, the pieces of eggshells all around began to dissolve into small particles before floating to Kane and getting absorbed into the white star in his body. Gradually, the appearance of his star began to change. The process was excruciatingly slow, but Kane could feel that there were definite changes. So I do have an affinity. I just have no idea what it is. Outside. C rating, undisclosed, called one of the homeroom teachers in an open area of the hall next to an instrument meant to assess the affinity of newly awakened students. While another recorded the rating next to the student's name. For the privacy of students, it does not inform the teacher of the exact details of a student's affinity. Therefore, it is up to the students if they'd like to disclose this information. However, it can obtain vague information on whether a student has an elemental affinity, species affinity, the strength of the creature they can bind, and how broad each affinity is. The broader a student's affinity, the more types of creatures they can bind, and the potential of the bound creatures determines a student's rating. A student that can bind any type of ice attribute spiritual creature would have greater potential than one who could only bind ice attribute cat spiritual creatures. After all, the number of species that meet the criteria is quite limited. A student that can bind to any lizard type, or better yet all reptile type creatures, would be rated higher than one who can only bind to geckos. Of course, there are exceptions. A student that can only bind fire attribute dragons would likely still achieve an A rating simply by the fact that they possess a rare affinity for the powerful dragons. However, a student with a low-rated affinity could still achieve great things if they manage to bind an extraordinarily strong creature that meets the conditions of their affinity. Additionally, a student that awakens a powerful gift may also have an ability to change their fate, but not even 1 in 500 awakened may manifest a gift, and most of them are useless. The rating of one's affinity, while an accurate predictor of how likely a student is to achieve success, is not a 100% accurate foretelling of their future. No affinity. D rating, undisclosed. No affinity. No affinity. No affinity. No affinity. A rating, feline affinity. At the sudden noticeable change in the teacher's voice, everyone in the building glanced over. After all, out of the 98 students qualified to undergo the awakening ceremony, so far 58 were unawakened with no affinity, 19 were rated D or less, 10 were rated C, 4 were rated B, and the only A rating so far is this one. He's probably the one with the highest affinity today, said one of the legacy students with a C rating, voice filled with envy. Maybe not, there are still 6 people that haven't woken up yet, said another C rating non-legacy who was just happy to awaken an affinity at all. Oh please, snorted the legacy, if they are taking this long to wake up they probably don't have any affinity and are just futilely looking for an affinity egg until their mental strength is exhausted and they're ejected from the space. Bridge's heart dropped upon hearing those words. He had been so happy to find out that he had a B-rated affinity and had a chance at entering a top college that he hadn't even considered what Kane not waking up yet could mean. Please Kane. Please have an affinity. He's up. Someone shouted. Bridge rushed over to where the other students were all gathered. Unfortunately, since those not awake were moved to a corner of the hall to avoid disturbing them and so that those awake could mingle, Bridge couldn't tell from the location of the chair if the student was Kane. Fortunately, with his height, Bridge was able to easily see over the sea of heads to the student that just woke up. It's not Kane, Bridge whispered with his shoulders slumping. He's also not likely awakened any affinity if the tears in his eyes are anything to go by, said a student with no affinity standing next to him who looked at the crying student with empathy. Realizing he had no affinity to test, all of the remaining students walked away without a second glance. After all, he's the 59th student with no affinity so far, and they all react the same way, by crying pitifully. Unfortunately, making this a sight that all teachers and students have grown accustomed to. A teacher, likely that student's homeroom teacher, went over to comfort him, and likely to confirm that he has no affinity to be recorded. Like I said, any student that hasn't woken up yet has no affinity. Why do we have to even wait for everyone to wake up before concluding the ceremony? We should just leave those talentless losers here and leave, said the C-rated legacy. Shut up, yelled Bridge. However, the next second he was shocked by his outburst. He never would have dreamed of saying that to a legacy in the past. But he couldn't stand how he was talking about Kane. Tisk, whatever. The legacy muttered before walking away. At first Bridge was surprised that someone so cocky and from an influential family would back down from him, an orphan. However, upon looking around Bridge got his answer. There were 2 conspicuous areas of space everyone else was giving a wide berth. Each only occupied by students with ratings B or higher that were sitting in groups. Students that still had a chance to enter one of the nation's top 5 colleges. Scratch that. There were 3 isolated areas, one with Bridge alone. That's when he realized that his fate, and the treatment he would receive has already changed forever. Look, another one woke up over there. Anxiously Bridge looked where the finger was pointed, but instantly he knew it wasn't Kane. After all, it was a girl. And not just any girl, Heather Frost. One of the legacies. Unquestionably, the most famous legacy in the school, both beautiful and rich. Supposedly her family is even a distant branch of one of the most powerful families in the empire. A family descended from one of the 5 founders no less. Surprisingly, like the previous individual that awoke, she was also crying. However, that didn't last long before her delicate features twisted with pure rage and she gave the most blood-curdling scream while smashing the chair she was sitting on. Arg. I don't believe this. I don't believe this. That bitch. I don't believe that bitch could awaken as she did and I can't at this goddamned ceremony. Miss Frost, please compose yourself. Yelled her homeroom teacher, Mr. Evergreen. One of the few teachers without an affinity, but was able to get this position due to his being admitted into one of the top 5 colleges based on his academic entrance exam scores alone. Mr. Evergreen reached to restrain her. Smack. Everyone stared in shock as the teacher's left cheek turned bright pink. Don't touch me, you affinity-less trash. Learning from you probably did this to me. She's lost it. One of the derated students snickered. A non-legacy that never would have dared to even look in her direction just yesterday. The results of the awakening ceremony really determine how you're treated in life, huh? Thought Bridge. Miss Frost. Restrain yourself this instant, yelled the principal. The spiritual power coming from a 3-star beast tamer that was injected into his voice caused several of the weaker students to even drop to their knees. Your behavior is absolutely unacceptable and we will be reporting your conduct to Mr. and Mrs. Frost. He said, before dragging out a now subdued Heather with streaks of tears running from her piercing blue eyes and her long dark hair covering her face. And then there were 4. Drawled Nigel, one of the few berated students, before everyone turned to look at the 4 individuals still sitting with their eyes still closed. Come on, Kane. Kane's mental space. After a while, the changes Kane felt in his star halted. But not because it was finished. Likely, because multiple eggs were absorbed. The final environment of his first star will conform to what best suits his first contract. Unfortunately, he has no idea what the first contract could be and the environment is too muddled for him to even sense what direction he should go in to find a suitable contract. Looking around at the now empty space and sensing if there were any more pulls into the distance, Kane confirmed that there was nothing left for him here. I guess I should leave now, huh? Kane thought, disappointed that there was nothing else here that could give him an answer as to what his affinity is. How do I leave though? The principal did not cover that. Suddenly Kane felt a much stronger pull, although not in any particular direction. Relaxing, he closed his eyes and chose to let the feeling consume him. I think that one's waking up. Shouted an unfamiliar voice. Opening his eyes, Kane was able to immediately spot the brown curly hair belonging to Bridge as he used his massive body to barrel his way towards him. Whoa. Calm down. You're going to crush me to death. Kane yelled in fear. However, after he wrapped his massive arms around him, Kane could feel him shivering. Please tell me that you have an affinity, Kane. Please. Feeling his shoulder now soaked with tears, Kane patted Bridge on the back. I did awaken, Bridge, don't worry, he whispered. Although I don't know what it is. Leaning back, with his hands still on his shoulders, Bridge's green teary eyes searched Kane's calm brown ones to see if he was telling the truth. Whatever he saw made him collapse in relief. Before breaking out into a wide grin. That means our orphanage has 2 individuals with an affinity. Instantly Kane forgot about his own issues regarding his affinity. You too. Bridge puffed out his chest. I received a B rating. Before Kane could celebrate further with his brother, they were interrupted. You've awakened an affinity, Kane? Asked Mr. Evergreen as he approached from behind Bridge. Yes, sir. Mr. Evergreen instantly looked ecstatic. Kane was his star pupil, and although he was certain that he could enter a top school by the academic exam alone, he knew firsthand how many doors open once one has an affinity. Even if it is only a D-ranked one. Let's go get you tested, he said, as he led him towards the testing machine, Bridge following closely behind. Please place your hands here and channel your spiritual power into the machine, directed another teacher Kane was unfamiliar with. As Kane reached forward as directed, he was incredibly nervous. He had no idea what his affinity was, so he had no benchmark for what his rating might be. Also, he could feel over 100 pairs of eyes coming from teachers and students bearing into the back of his head. Channeling his meager amount of spiritual power into the machine, Kane waited for his results. Kane waited anxiously for the machine to finally read out his results. Beep. The unfamiliar teacher went to read out the results while Kane, Mr. Evergreen, and Bridge waited anxiously. And waited. And waited. Ahem. Mr. Evergreen cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, would you please be so kind as to inform Kane of his result? Still silence. Kane's fingers began to riffle through his black locks anxiously. Thankfully, the fed-up Mr. Evergreen moved to look at the monitor on the instrument. However, aside from widening his eyes, he also remained silent. Mr. Evergreen. Mr. Evergreen. Startled, his homeroom teacher finally collected himself. Sorry, Kane. It's an S rating. What? An S rating, Kane. Immediately the crowd of onlooking students burst into loud chatter while the remaining teachers ran over to confirm it for themselves. Among the students staring at him with envy, and some fear, was Bridge tearfully giving a dimply grin so wide as if it had just been his rating read out. Feeling a shiver down his spine, Kane turned to see the returning principal. One of the teachers must have informed him of his rating, because he began to stalk towards Kane with an amorous look in his eyes that he would never want to receive from a middle-aged man. Once he reached Kane, he began to touch and squeeze various areas of Kane's body. Had he not been significantly stronger than him, he would have already received a fist to his lecherous eyes. You. Principal Waters said while gently cupping Kane's face, you are the first S-rated student in our school's history. And I am the principal responsible for nurturing you. Not really. This is like the 4th time I've seen you in my life. Kane struggled to not to roll his eyes, as he was forced to stare into the principal's eyes, which had practically transformed into dollar signs. I'm going to buy a new house, with a pool, a new car too. I heard that luxury brand just came out with a new model, Waters muttered to himself as he walked away to where the other teachers were surrounding the machine. After all of the teachers had confirmed his rating, the one responsible for his reading, Mr. Cole, and his homeroom teacher, Mr. Evergreen, approached him. Congratulations, Kane, said Cole, would you like to disclose your affinity? Immediately the surroundings quieted down as everyone curiously waited to hear what affinity would grant an S rating. Sorry, I can't satisfy your curiosity since I don't know either. I wish to keep it undisclosed, replied Kane as he immediately heard sighs of disappointment all around him. Smart choice. The less people know about your affinity, their ability to target you declines. A lot of students, caught up in the pride of an S rating, would loudly proclaim their affinity. I am so glad you could keep a level head. You truly are my star pupil. Mr. Evergreen patted him on the back before both teachers walked away. Suddenly Kane felt large arms surrounding him, squeezing tightly. It was Bridge. An S rating, Kane. I can't believe it. Yeah, me neither. This has been the most successful affinity ceremony in our academy's history, stated the principal in the closing speeches once the remaining 3 students after Kane, all without an affinity, opened their eyes. We have an astonishing 36% success rate, as well as our first ever student an affinity rating of S. The principal's eyebrows twitched repeatedly in happiness, tears pooled in his eyes. Kane squirmed awkwardly in his seat while all of the eyes in the hall turned towards him. For those of you that were unable to awaken an affinity, do not be discouraged. There are a variety of very lucrative career paths for you to choose. In fact, many of you unawakened may prove to be more successful than your awakened peers. For those of you that do possess an affinity, do not be content. Now is when the real hard work begins. If you hope to have some measure of success as a beast tamer and be strong enough to leave city walls to enter the wilderness unaccompanied, you would typically need to become at least a 3-star level tamer. However, of the 35 of you who can become beast tamers, less than half of you will likely ever reach such a level. However, our school is willing to give you a head start on your journey. Those who wish can follow me once the ceremony has concluded to select your contract from among what the breeders at our school have to offer. The majority of the newly awakened students let out a loud cheer. After all, spiritual creatures, even the weakest of them, are notoriously expensive. For orphans like Kane and Bridge, this opportunity was an absolute godsend. However, the legacy students look unmoved. The quality of potential contracts that the school can provide would obviously greatly pale in comparison to what their own families could provide. After concluding his speech, all of the unawakened and legacies left. 24 of the remaining students followed a teacher towards where the school's breeding grounds were located. Bridge and Kane being the only ones with a rating of B or higher to stay. What are you planning to bind, Kane? Bridge asked, practically shivering from excitement. I don't even know what I can bind, Cain thought. Not sure. I'm not even sure if they will have anything suitable for me once we enter. Figures. An S rating like you probably needs to bind something like a dragon or phoenix, huh? Cain flinched as his friend unintentionally dug into the wounds of his crushed dreams. Let's talk about this later at home, Cain managed to grit out through tears. Of course. Of course. But Cain, can you please help me with my first contract? Are you sure, Bridge? This is a pretty big decision to entrust to somebody else. Absolutely sure. After all, the first contract position will have a big impact on whether I can go to a top college or not, and I can't think of anyone I trust more than you who is as knowledgeable as you about spiritual creatures. You have the top theoretical exam scores in our year for a reason. Suddenly burdened with a decision that could completely alter the course of his friend's life, Cain nodded solemnly and entered the breeding hall with Bridge. What's your affinity anyways? Wolves. The quality of spiritual beasts can be divided into levels. Black iron beasts are the least talented with the lowest upper limit in strength. They are only slightly better than ordinary beasts which have no spiritual power. No beast tamer would bind to one unless under extraordinary circumstances. Their potential, without evolving, is also very low, likely never graduating from the lowest white spiritual power to red. Bronze beasts have decent fighting power. However, their abilities are really only effective at the 1-star level, while their potential without evolving allows them to eventually condense red-grade spiritual power, corresponding to a human's 2-star level of power. Although they may go one level higher to orange-grade spiritual power with some luck. Similarly, silver-quality beasts normally can reach a strength level of orange-grade spiritual power, corresponding to 3-star humans, and yellow-grade spiritual power with some luck and hard work. For even higher-quality beasts, those gold and above, they are impossible for the Academy to possess. Heck, there may not be a single gold-quality beast in this entire city. They are exceptionally rare and usually only possessed by beast tamers above 4 stars. As for beasts above gold quality, they are completely in Cain's blind spot. He will likely need to enter one of the top 5 colleges to even have a hope of ever seeing one. Knowing this, Cain's goal for Bridge would be to find a suitable bronze-quality beast with decent evolutionary potential. It is unlikely that the school would possess a single silver-quality one. Entering the breeding grounds, Cain was fascinated by the many spiritual creatures that he had only gotten to see in textbooks so far. However, after the novelty wore off, Cain got down to business and began to look for a suitable first contract for Bridge. After looking at all of the cages, Cain was pleasantly surprised to find that the school had quite a large collection of young spiritual beasts, over 200. However, only 5 of them were wolf types, 2 of which were black iron quality sand wolves, likely littermates. Of the remaining 3, all were bronze quality. A water attribute river wolf pup, a fire attribute ash wolf pup, and a wind attribute hurricanine pup. Cain quickly went through the pros and cons of each in his head. The river pup has the greatest evolutionary potential, immediately skipping over silver quality in its next evolution to become a gold quality clear spring wolf, which also possesses some healing capabilities. Additionally, because most students choose to go with the offensive fire attribute spiritual creatures for their first contract, if their affinity does not have an attribute restriction, then the river pup would give Bridge a huge advantage during the college admissions tests. Unfortunately, river pups need a constant supply of top-quality rare herbs located near rivers inhabited by spiritual creatures with at least orange-grade spiritual power, making the cost of purchasing said herbs from mercenaries astronomically expensive. In short, it is out of the price range for the orphans Bridge and Cain. The ash wolf pup is named as such because they feed on coal, and are often found covered in black soot resembling ash in coal mines. Therefore, their biggest advantage is that their preferred food source, coal, is super cheap. Although as far as fire attributes go, they are quite weak among the rest of the fire attribute bronze quality spiritual creatures. This means that Bridge will likely be at a disadvantage when undergoing the admissions tests for college. It has 2 known evolutionary forms, a silver-quality mine wolf, also not of particularly great strength, and a gold-quality gem wolf. However, there are less than 40 gem wolves in the entire empire, and the stringent evolutionary conditions would not be known by people with no background like Cain and Bridge. Last but not least is the hurricanine pup. They don't possess many long-range attacks and their wind attribute is mainly demonstrated through their incredible speed. Few contracts of bronze quality, and even silver quality with proper training, would be able to match its speed. Therefore, it would be greatly beneficial for Bridge's admissions tests. Unfortunately, their development path is also the one Cain is least knowledgeable about. Hurricanine pups have numerous evolutionary pathways that are determined by how they are cared for in their diet. Without being able to afford the help of an official evolutionary planner, Cain isn't confident in being able to properly maximize its potential. After expressing his thoughts to Bridge, Cain waited for his decision. Will it be the expensive, but high-potential river wolf pup? The weaker, but cost-effective ash wolf pup? Or the malleable wildcard hurricanine pup? Bridge gave an audible gulp. This will likely be one of the most important decisions of his life. Before we make the final decision, maybe we should ask a breeder for more information on the needs for raising each of them. Cain said after 5 minutes passed and Bridge was no closer to a decision. The two approached a pink-haired breeder feeding the river pup. "Excuse me, we would like more information on caring for the wolf-type contract beasts," Cain said. "Well, once you select your chosen partner, you will receive a detailed manual on your contract's ideal diet, evolutionary path, and other unique needs. You will also receive 1 week's supply of all required materials for your contract. Afterwards, it is up to you to provide for them. Although once your week's supply runs out, you can continue to purchase food for your pet here and receive a student discount until you graduate." Cain turned and whispered to Bridge, "How much do you have saved from working as a farmhand the last 3 years?" "About 15,000 celestial dollars. Not bad. That should be enough to provide for his first contract for a period of time before Bridge has enough strength to explore nearby low-level wilderness regions to hopefully make even more money as a mercenary or explorer." "How much would a week's supply of food for the river wolf pup be?" Cain asked. "The 19,500 CD, replied the breeder with a practiced salesperson grin. "And after the student discount?" "That is the price including the 30% student discount," replied the breeder cheerily. "Yeah, the river pup is definitely out," thought Cain. "What about the hurricanine pup?" "Well, it depends on the development direction you choose to go for your contract. We provide the necessary diet and materials for 2 possible evolutionary directions, both of which are around 1100 CD per week." Both Bridge and Cain breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully, the river pup is an exception and most contracts are not that expensive to provide for. Although it's still crazy to think that the hurricanine pup will use up the money Bridge spent 3 years saving in only a little more than 3 months. And the ash wolf? The breeder's practiced salesperson smile was immediately less enthusiastic. "Since it only needs coal, it's only around 250 CD per week." Turning away from the breeder's now deadpan expression, Cain and Bridge convened to make the final decision. "I think I should go with the ash wolf, Cain. I'd have no trouble feeding it for a long time, and I'd feel guilty spending money that could probably feed everyone in the orphanage for a year on my contract in just a few months." "You need to think long-term, Bridge. The ash wolf is pretty weak among bronze-quality beasts, meaning that you will have one of the weakest contracts when going for the college admissions tests. Also, unless we know the evolutionary conditions for a gem wolf, which it doesn't look like our school knows, then it can only follow the path of a mine wolf, meaning its evolutionary potential is also low. If you contract the hurricanine wolf, your chances of getting admitted into a good college increase dramatically. Although you only have enough money to care for it for 3 months, within 3 months you may be a student at a top college by then, and feeding it may not even be a big deal to you. Especially since I heard students at the top 5 colleges have the basic nutritional needs for their contracts covered by the school." Seeing that Bridge was still hesitating, Cain patted him on the shoulder and continued, "I know you were saving some of that money to help out the orphanage director. However, don't you think you'd be able to help out the entire orphanage a lot better if you can get into a top college and earn a lot more money in the future?" Bridge slowly nodded. Decision made, Cain and Bridge turned to the breeder waiting nearby. "We will take the hurricanine pup, as well as 4 weeks' worth of food." Seeing that they didn't choose the ash wolf and were even buying a month's worth of food at once, the breeder's happy expression immediately returned. "Perfect. Since the school covers the costs of your first contract, we can immediately perform the contract before getting you checked out with the food you requested." They all made their way over to the cage containing the sole hurricanine pup in the facility. "You made an excellent choice. C0039 is a pup not only with tremendous potential, but out of all the canines in the facility she is one of the most obedient. C0039. Asked Bridge. Ah, that's just her ID number. You can rename her once the contract is completed. Do you know how to conclude a contract? Both Bridge and Kane tentatively nodded their heads. After all, they knew how to conclude a contract in theory. Seeing their hesitant nods, the worker decided to still coach them through the contract. To ensure that the contract is concluded, there must be no resistance from either party. Therefore, either both parties agree to the contract, or the unwilling party is unconscious when commencing the contract. Thankfully, as I've mentioned, C0039 is very agreeable and should not refuse to form a contract with you. At your level, a medium is needed to establish a contract, typically blood. Technically, any bodily fluids can achieve this effect, but considering most individuals do not have an abnormal inclination to swap spit with their contract, blood is typically used as the medium. You will then use your spiritual power to help guide your contract's spiritual power to your star, its future home. Once the contract is concluded, she should appear in your star, and the environment of said star should begin to alter to better suit her needs. Understood. Sounds straightforward, Bridge said after giving a large gulp. Excellent. Let's get started. Please stretch out your hand. Bridge did as directed with his eyes tightly squeezed shut. Bridge gave a flinch at the sudden cut, before opening his eyes. That didn't hurt so much. The breeder then bent down to open the hurricane's cage. Come here, sweetie. Now give me your paw. Excellent. You're such a good girl. After making a cut on the pup's paw, the breeder stood up and backed away to give Bridge space. Make sure that the incisions are making contact. Bridge did as directed, and immediately let out a muffled grunt. Very good. She'll likely need your help to direct her spiritual power to the right location. Bridge, while still holding onto the paw, bowed his head while sweat began to form on his brow. It looks like forming the contract is not as easy as we thought, Kane thought while watching from the side. After nearly 10 minutes, the pup let out a white glow before disappearing and Bridge straightened up while panting heavily. Great job, said the breeder. The first contract is usually the most difficult. After all, it's not an easy task for students to guide another's spiritual power with their crude control. You may proceed to checkout when you are ready to leave. I've already gathered your requested materials at the front desk. The two nodded before turning to leave when they suddenly felt as though it was hard to breathe. This was the pressure of a 2-star beast tamer's spiritual power. Also, don't forget to tell the front desk that Merida was the one to assist you. If I lose out on my commission, I do know exactly where to find you, came a chilling voice from behind them. The two nodded quickly before dashing towards the front desk once the pressure was alleviated. After checking out, Bridge decided to head back towards the orphanage, excited to release his first contract and begin bonding. However, Kane decided to explore the breeding grounds a little longer. Supposedly, when people with an affinity are around a suitable contract, they will feel a faint pull similar to the one during the affinity ceremony. Maybe I can get some clues about what my affinity is from exploring around here. Kane took his time stopping in front of all of the cages and sensing if there was any pull. Even the black iron ones, after all, it's not as though he plans to contract any of them, he just needs a clue as to what he can and cannot bind. However, after nearly 2 hours and exploring every cage, Kane was no closer to finding any answers. Sigh. Do you need any help? Ah. Startled, Kane turned around to see the pink-haired scary breeder Merida. Her face was mere inches from his ear. I can't find a spiritual creature suitable to contract. I see. Well, these are all of the spiritual beasts we have available to contract. You could try the nursery, which contains all of our unhatched spiritual creatures. Most of the eggs are the same species as the young ones out here, but occasionally we get an egg of unknown origin that was sold to us by mercenaries or explorers. If you have an affinity for any of the eggs, you should be able to sense it. I didn't know we could select an egg. There's no rules against it. But considering most college entrance tests are within 2 months and there's no guarantee an egg would even hatch by then, it's very rare for a student to select an egg for the first contract. Kane nodded in understanding. He also had no intention of binding to an egg for his first contract, but he feels an affinity for an egg and can figure out what is in that egg, maybe he'll have a better idea of what his affinity is. Making his way to the nursery, Kane spotted hundreds of eggs of varying shapes, colors, and sizes within glass incubators. As breeder Merida said, all of the eggs Kane had passed so far had labels for the species as were in the cages outside. It wasn't until he had looked through over 90% of the eggs that he got to a section of unidentified eggs without labels. There were 20. Stopping before the first one, a beautiful multicolored egg with pink, violet, and blue hues, Kane closed his eyes to see if there was any pull. Nothing. Stopping before a light blue egg that gave off a chill Kane could feel through the incubator, Kane once again closed his eyes. Again nothing. After going through all 20 eggs, Kane was now at the very back of the nursery but still did not feel any pull. Sigh. Leaning against a staff-only door at the back of the room, Kane closed his eyes in despair when suddenly he felt a pull. Clues to Kane's affinity, too. His eyes snapped open in shock. Finally, Kane may get some clues as to what his affinity is. Reaching frantically for the handle of the door, he tried to open it. Locked. He immediately rushed back towards where breeder Merida was. I felt a pull. Can you please help me get that egg? Kane said excitedly. Merida calmly followed Kane as he led the way towards the back of the nursery. She was walking way too slow for his liking, but there was nothing he could do about it. In here, he said, pointing to the locked door for staff. Merida's face immediately turned strange. I know it's staff only in there. But could I please at least get a glimpse at what's causing this draw? It's the only one I've felt since awakening my affinity, Kane begged. Merida shrugged and then proceeded to open the door. Sure, it's not a big deal. It's not like there's anything top secret or rare inside. As the door swung open and they entered a dimly lit room, she explained, this is where we keep all of the dead eggs. Kane's stomach immediately dropped. What? Dead eggs? None of the eggs in here will hatch. Sorry to disappoint you. Kane entered the room and quickly located the source of the draw. It was the ugliest egg he had seen since entering the nursery. It was black, and wasn't smooth like most eggs, full of bumps all over. Then there was the smell. Ugh. He turned away while covering his nose. Told you. Nothing is ever hatching out of there. Could you at least tell me what was supposed to be in there? Maybe it'll at least provide him with some hint. It was found among a pack of shadow leopards. However, it is known that shadow leopards do eat eggs, and shadow leopard eggs do not resemble this one. Also, strangely, all of the shadow leopards, at least 200 of them according to the mercenaries' reports, were dead but had no injuries on their bodies. That is strange. Shadow leopards are gold quality and located at the most extreme eastern borders of the empire. Even among gold quality species, they are among the most deadly and difficult to kill due to their ability to jump from shadow to shadow. Did they have any more information about where this pack was located? Not really. They did say they were coming back from a mission at a relic controlled by Dark Moon College. Dark Moon College. One of the 5 top colleges, last year ranking 3rd out of the 5. Can I still use my voucher to exchange for this egg? After all, since it may not be a shadow leopard egg, he'd like to study it longer. Maybe at college, with more access to higher-level books and professors, he could figure out its species. Also, he hasn't completely given up on the hideous egg. As far as he knows, a pull should only be felt if there is something he can bind to. Once a creature dies, the pull should no longer exist unless he has the rare affinity for the undead. But, although rare and undead affinity is not so completely unheard of as to not know what awakening an undead affinity should look like. What should hatch from his affinity eggs during the ceremony, if he had an undead affinity, would be the appearance of the undead that he could bind, whether that be skeletal, ghost, or reanimated corpses. There is no need to use your free exchange on a dead egg. You can just take it. Thanks. Not wanting to waste a free opportunity to exchange, Kane decided to take the chilly blue unidentified egg he saw earlier. It resembles the eggs of the silver quality icebite wolf, which is an ice attribute wolf that causes severe frost burns upon touch. It is typically only found in the northern regions, so, understandably, nobody here recognized its egg. Had he not been studying to potentially enter an evolutionary planner major in college, he also likely would not have recognized it. I should remind you that any creatures taken from here cannot be sold. Otherwise, you risk receiving severe fines and even jail time. Merida's eyes narrowed in suspicion. After all, she already guessed that he did not have an affinity for this egg based on what he said earlier. I am aware. Thank you. It isn't selling if he just gives it to Bridge when the time comes for his second contract. After exchanging for the egg with his free voucher and receiving a free complimentary incubator in place of the typical free week's worth of food, Kane put everything into his school bag and headed back to the orphanage. Home sweet home. I wonder if Bridge already spoiled the surprise of our results to everyone. In the far outskirts of the city, Kane gradually approached a rundown building, New Beginnings Orphanage. It was surrounded by many fruit trees, and even from a distance he could see the garden full of almost fully grown vegetables. Crack. Kane approached the last group of fruit trees and bushes before the orphanage. Crack. SHHHH. You idiot. Kane proceeded forward, ignoring the hushed angry whispers. Rounding the final tree until the orphanage. Argh. Kane stopped in place with a bored expression. Cherry. Key. Did you two really expect that to work? Amen. This is completely your fault. The blonde pigtailed Cherry yelled while hitting the red-headed freckled boy slightly shorter than her. After her short tantrum, the two looked up at Kane in nervous anticipation. So, big brother, said Cherry, how did the ceremony go? Kane looked down at the two juvenile faces that couldn't be older than 10 and realized that Bridge couldn't have spilled the beans. I don't want to repeat it multiple times. Bridge and I will say our results once everyone is gathered. Sigh. What, Cherry? Whispered Key. Learn to read between the lines, Key. Big brother Bridge came home and ran straight upstairs without saying his results. Now brother Kane wants to avoid having to say his results more than once. Likely because it hurts too much. Both of them clearly didn't awaken an affinity, Cherry whispered back. Should I tell Cherry that her whisper voice is louder than most people's normal speaking voice? Deciding against it, Kane pretended not to hear their whispering and headed inside the orphanage. Is everyone including the director back already? Kane asked. Yup, the two children nodded in unison. Perfect. Can you two call everyone to the living room for a moment please so Bridge and I could get this over with? I will go get Bridge. The two nodded again as Kane turned to head to the room he shared with Bridge. See, I told you they both didn't awaken. Now his ego is probably wounded. That poor prideful fool, Cherry whispered to Key before the two scampered off. Kane's eyebrow twitched in annoyance, but he decided against correcting her assumptions and headed upstairs instead. Entering the room he shared with Bridge, Kane saw Bridge with his new contract on their bed. Hey Kane. I'd like for you to officially meet Lady. Bridge proudly announced before holding his contract up to Kane's face. Lady. Yes. Because she is so well-mannered and beautiful like a noble lady from an old legacy family. Aren't you, my fair lady? Bridge replied, while turning her around and showering her face in kisses. Face scrunching up at the public display of affection, Kane quickly interrupted the baby-talking Bridge. Why didn't you tell everyone the results already? Cherry and Key didn't seem to know. I figured you'd want to be there when I broke the surprise. Not to mention, I didn't think they'd believe me when I said you'd received a S rating. So I restrained myself from spoiling the surprise and immediately returned to our room to give you the honors, Bridge grandly announced. You just wanted to immediately release Lady and not be bothered by the others. Kane thought, not buying Bridge's seemingly noble excuse. Thanks. Let's head down and announce the results together. I still haven't told anyone and I'm sure they're anxiously waiting. When Bridge and Kane entered the living room they saw all 9 children in the orphanage, plus the orphanage director Silas along with their neighbors Farmer John and his wife Sally, sitting on the couch, chairs, and floor. Kane could tell that they were taking extra care to manage their facial expression. However, none of them were skilled actors. All of them had varying combinations of disappointedness, sadness, frustration, and pity on their faces. Probably as a result of his and Bridge's results already being spoiled by Cherry's interpretation. They really are my family, thought Kane. Kane took a deep breath to compose himself and prevent his laughter from escaping. While similarly, Bridge lowered his head with his shoulders shaking in laughter. Thankfully, Based on the increasingly solemn expressions of his family members, they mistook their attempts at smothering their laughter as trying to choke back tears. "I'm sure you all know what today was," began Kane. Everyone slowly nodded. "And I am sure you all know that the chances of awakening are not high, so Bridge and I were already emotionally prepared to fail going into the ceremony." Everybody's shoulders dropped. Key and the two youngest children, Charlie and Melody, looked as though they would burst into tears at any moment. Fortunately, Bridge was able to awaken a berated affinity to wolf-type spiritual beasts. Kane put down his solemn facade, and Bridge raised his head to reveal a large smile. Everyone's faces froze into expressions of disbelief before breaking out into large cheers. "Really? Really?" Hearing the expressions of disbelief, Bridge proudly released Lady from the space in his star. "This is my first contract, Lady. The most beautiful hurricanine in the Empire. No. This planet." Everyone, especially the children, immediately swarmed Lady, while trying to touch her. Thankfully, as Merida said, she's very obedient and didn't attack any of them. The adults were more focused on the rest of what Kane said. "Did you say a B rating?" questioned Director Silas with sparkling eyes. Kane and Bridge both nodded. Farmer John and the director immediately burst into delighted laughter, while Sally enveloped Bridge into a hug. "Our boy is going to be a beast tamer. And may even enter one of the top colleges." After 10 minutes of celebration, when the children had finished tossing Lady around, and the adults calmed down, everyone's faces dropped into awkward expressions once they realized that Kane had never announced his results. Half of the room couldn't even make eye contact with him. Kane changed his voice into a pitiful whisper, "As for me." Whimper. Key, Charlie, and Melody finally couldn't stand it and burst into tears. Seeing this, Kane immediately rushed to put them out of their misery and loudly declared, "I received an S-rated affinity." Once again, the room froze. But even after a full minute, everyone did not react. "Ahem. Did you guys not hear Kane?" "An S-rated affinity," repeated Bridge. Sally was the first to unfreeze. "We heard you. Kane, we heard you, it's just that. It's too hard to believe," finished the director, "that one of the few S-rated individuals in our celestial empire's history will be coming from my orphanage." Seeing that everyone was still not 100% confident that he was telling the truth, Kane removed the incubator from his bag. "Here is an egg I exchanged for at the school's breeding grounds. Only newly awakened individuals have that privilege." Everyone began to gradually look more lively but still didn't seem to 100% believe him. After all, confirming he awakened is very different from saying he also had an S rating. Remembering another detail, Kane dug through his bag. All the students with a rating of B or higher received a certificate from Principal Waters with his signature that would grant us entrance into the admissions tests for the top 5 colleges. It also includes our ratings. Both Bridge and I received one. "Here," Kane announced after handing the slightly crushed certificate over to the director. After processing that it was an official certificate, with the principal's signature and a stamp from the local government official, the director's hands began to shake. Farmer John and Sally were also no calmer. "I think today calls for a feast." After Farmer John's declaration, everyone worked together to prepare one of the grandest meals they had had in a while. The director even opened his prized bottle of aged whiskey, and let Kane and Bridge have a sip. Ugh. They both winced as the adults laughed. "What do you young uns know about quality?" the director slurred. At this point, all of the other orphans had already gone to bed, and Sally had returned to her and John's home. Only Kane and Bridge remained with the two tipsy adult men. "So what are your future plans?" asked Farmer John, speech a lot clearer than the director's. Bridge shrugged his shoulders. He hadn't thought that he would have a chance at a top college. Even awakening an affinity feels like a dream. "What about you, Kane?" "You will both probably try for the top 5 colleges. After all, there is a considerable gap between the funding, resources and instruction they have when compared to those mid- and low-tiered colleges. I'm not 100% sure. If necessary, I may try for more than one. But I think my first choice will be the Dark Moon College." "Dark Moon?" John asked, surprised. That college was all the way in the east. Bright Star City, where they lived, was in the southern region. Therefore, most local geniuses' first choice college was Starfire College, currently ranked 4th among the top 5 colleges. That's quite far. Any particular reason why? John asked curiously. Bridge also turned to look at Kane in confusion. Because so far the only lead I have about my affinity leads me to there. The needs for my affinity are quite unique. I think Dark Moon College would be best able to meet them. John and Bridge nodded slowly. Seeing that Kane still did not want to disclose what his affinity was, they did not pressure him for answers. Snore. Turning to look at the fast-asleep director, they realized that it was probably time to head to bed. Covering Director Silas with a quilt, they said their goodbyes to John before making their way upstairs. I need to get more information on the admissions test for Dark Moon College. The last thoughts of Kane and Bridge were surprisingly identical as they fell into slumber. Thankfully, the wishes of Kane and Bridge were answered the next day, as the 6 students with a rating of B or above were called by Principal Waters to a separate conference room. Upon entering, the 6 students were greeted by the sight of 3 unfamiliar individuals. After everyone was seated, the principal began with the introductions. These 3 are former graduates of our Academy 1200. They are also the only graduates in recent years to enter the combat-oriented beast taming major at one of the top 5 colleges. The 6 students instantly became more attentive and looked at the guest lecturers with eyes full of admiration. The guests also seemed to revel in these gazes from their juniors as their chins subconsciously tilted up higher and their backs straightened. They are here to recount their own experiences with the college admissions test and also to provide advice to you. There are over 5,000 high school academies in the Empire, each of which typically churn out between 2 and 12 students qualified to take the entrance exam for the top 5 colleges. This means that thousands of students are competing for only 1 out of around 100 available spots at a top 5 college. Therefore, admissions rates for each school are typically below 5%. The first graduate stepped forward, the only girl of the 3. She had light blue hair and eyes, a childish face, and her height barely reached Kane's chest. It's hard to believe that an individual that looks as though they could be blown away with a single punch was admitted into a combat major at one of the top 5 colleges. Although the strength of one's contracts is most important, a contractor too weak would only be a hindrance in battle, thought Kane. I am Bridget, a second-year cadet at Supernova College in the West. Everyone, except the principal, including the other guest lecturers, appeared shocked. Supernova College is ranked second out of all the colleges. But above all, they were notorious for being the most bloodthirsty of them all. The image that comes to mind of their students from rumors is of war-hungry warriors that lick the blood of their enemies off their blades after they've finished decapitating them. Even their way of referring to their students as cadets shows their militaristic atmosphere. This petite girl goes there. I had an A rating. Avian type affinity. She continued calmly, seemingly used to the shocked looks when people heard the name of her school. Supernova College's entrance test is the only one to remain unchanged for years now. Therefore, if you choose to partake in it, you all will know exactly what to expect. Typically, there are around 7,000 applicants for Supernova, which are then sorted into 70 arenas of 100 applicants. The final man, or woman, standing will secure a spot at Supernova College. The other top 9 students to last each round will then be given another opportunity to compete against one another for the remaining 30 spots until an entering class of 100 cadets is formed. Pretty straightforward. Any questions? An entrance exam that truly befits their reputation, thought Kane. After a moment of silence, Nigel, one of the B-rated legacy students, raised his hand. Yeah, what method did you use to survive? Although it was a little rude in its bluntness, he did ask what they were all thinking. How did someone as small as her manage to beat out 99 other talented students? She stared into Nigel's eyes before moving her gaze to the rest of them. My method is not easily replicable by anyone here. My strategy could be summed up using 2 words, height advantage. Tiffany, another B-rated legacy, tentatively raised her hand. What was the initial contract beast you used to complete the exam? My initial contract is a crystal albatross. At those words, pretty much everyone in the room nodded in understanding. The crystal albatross is one of the few silver-quality flying contracts that could support the weight of a small human. Combined with her seemingly light weight and their outstanding stamina, they probably attacked the other applicants from high above so that they could not even fight back. Attacks at a long enough range to strike down flying attackers are quite common among 3-star beast tamers who typically possess contracts at the level of orange-grade spiritual power. However, most 1-star applicants, regardless of the quality of their contract, will likely only have white or red grade contracts. However, I was lucky that none of the top applicants were in my group. Otherwise, I would have lost. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Who could cause someone with such a seemingly foolproof strategy to lose? What is the strength of these so-called top applicants? Asked the only A-rated applicant, Arlo, whose expression finally showed some seriousness. Although he was also listening carefully, his expression had always exuded confidence as though he was certain of his passing any admissions test. Well, for one, many of the applicants likely have already reached 2 stars by the time of the entrance exam in 1.5 months. Everyone looked shocked at those words. Most of our teachers were only at the level of 2 stars, while our principal only had 3 stars. My own arena had at least 12 of them, although thankfully most of them were eliminated by others before we met. The one I did meet though was unable to touch me with either of his contracts so that I could whittle away his strength. However, those weren't the true geniuses. If that's not considered genius, what is? Kane could see similar expressions of disbelief on the faces of the other students, including the principal. Although the other 2 graduates did not look surprised, probably having similar experiences. One of the arenas with the shortest battle times in my year had an applicant with a gold-quality twin-tailed Firefox. Moreover, both he and his contract had red-grade spiritual power tinged with orange, indicating that they were just a hair's breadth from the 3-star level. What a monster! Gulp. Everyone looked toward the sound to find their very own 3-star principal, who appeared more intimidated than his own students. Another arena with a pretty fast resolution had an applicant with an extraordinary gift. He was able to make both he and his contract invisible. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. Beast tamers manifesting a gift are extremely rare, and useful ones even more so. However, the ability to become invisible may not be as useful when facing creatures above the yellow rank in strength. This gift is too overpowered at the level of fresh high school graduates. Although gifts are extremely rare among the general populace. At the top 5 colleges that only want the best of the best, nearly half of all students manage to manifest a gift before they graduate college, although not all are useful in battle. Seeing that there were no more questions, as everyone fell into stunned silence at her shocking revelations, Bridget stepped backwards to allow another former graduate to take her place. An ordinary-looking blonde boy with freckles stepped forward in her place. I am Jeremy, and behind me is Kit, and we both go to the much more local Starfire College, he said, gesturing to the large bearded man behind him. I am a 3rd year, while Kit is a 1st year. That bearded middle-aged looking guy is a 1st year. Everyone looked shocked. Seemingly used to the looks, Kit cut in, yes, despite how I look, I am only 1 year older than you. Jeremy took over again. Although we both go to the same college, Starfire's exam differs each year, and even between the same group of incoming students, therefore you would benefit from both of our experiences. The southern region is the most populous next to the central region containing the capital, therefore, the students of our college have a higher mandatory number of missions they must complete each year in the service of the southern region. In preparation for this, the prospective students each year are randomly grouped together and assigned to complete one of the Tier 1 tasks that first-year college students would usually be required to complete. During the course of the mission, we were followed, and those performing to a suitable standard in the teams that successfully cleared their mission would be given an offer to enroll. Therefore, if your team successfully clears a mission, you may receive an offer depending on your performance, while if your team fails, regardless of how stellar your individual performance is, you will not receive an offer. No exceptions. Therefore, cross your fingers and pray you do not get grouped with a bunch of useless individuals. Because if the mission fails because of only one of you, then you all fail. Additionally, due to Starfire's unique recruitment method, the size of the incoming class tends to vary greatly from year to year. My year had the most failed missions in recent history, with only 46 students of the 50 that were part of successful missions admitted. Yes, out of thousands of applicants, grouped into teams of 5, only 10 teams successfully completed their missions. However, a year with a much higher success rate may see as many as 200 students being admitted. Also note that the evaluators are there to assess your performance, not to protect you. Therefore, as you are going into an unregulated environment to complete real missions, there is a very real possibility of death. 20 students passed in the year I was admitted alone. Gulp. This time it was all of the high school students that audibly gulped in shock and fear. Although 20 students out of thousands of applicants is not a lot, most of them have never faced the threat of death in their lives. Now I will go into further detail about my admissions exam, which may shed some light on why our year had such an abnormal pass rate and death toll. Think back to 3 years ago when there was a terrorist attack on the Morningstar Palace, the political center of our southern region. As you could probably guess, most missions, regardless of the tier, were related to either identifying, scouting, arresting, or assassinating members of the said terrorist group. As we were given Tier 1 missions, the risk of death in each mission was extremely low. However, most of us were given missions in which we would have to interact to some extent with these criminals. The college had received information that prior to the terrorist attack, one of the suspects had been spotted at a home in Red Star City, about a 16-hour drive southeast from here. Our goal was to obtain information on why he was there, and if there were any of his accomplices still there. As the details of our mission are strictly confidential, I cannot go into too much detail, but as evidenced by the fact that I was admitted, you can see that we succeeded in our mission. Interesting, the contents of their exam differ greatly from Supernova College, thought Kane. Any questions? Jeremy prompted after we all sat in contemplative silence for a while. I do, said the principal, likely to prevent the silence from stretching on longer. Do you have any general words of advice for our students? Advice that will benefit them regardless of what their mission is. Jeremy tilted his head in contemplation before opening his mouth. Be prepared for anything. Also. His breath caught as though he was trying to restrain his emotions. Put away any qualms you have about killing other humans. When it comes to enemies of the Empire, if you don't kill them, they will kill you. After giving those heavy final words, Jeremy stepped back so that Kit could recount his experience. Thankfully, my year was more easygoing, with 113 of us passing. The types of missions we all received were also much more diverse. Our mission was regarding Starfruit Village, a village near the outskirts of our southern region. This time last year, this village was experiencing a terrible famine, therefore resources and supplies needed to be brought to them as soon as possible. However, mysteriously all of the caravans sent towards the village never arrived. Our task was to safely escort the next group of caravans while determining the reason for the previous caravan's disappearance. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty details, but similar to what Jeremy said, beasts aren't the only ones you may have to kill. Again, the room fell into a long period of surprised silence. Most of the high schoolers were not mentally prepared to fight and kill other humans. Thank you, Kit. And thanks to the rest of our guest lecturers, your experiences have surely helped our students greatly. The principal broke the silence while applauding. Kane and the others also joined in the applause. After all, although their experiences were intimidating, the fact that they were taking the time out of their busy college life to give high schoolers advice and answer their questions was something to be immensely grateful for. Do you students have any questions remaining? Now's your last chance, the principal said while glancing at Kane and the others. Kane immediately put his hand up. Do any of you have knowledge about the Dark Moon College entrance exam? The 3 guest lecturers looked at one another, before Bridget stepped forward, likely realizing that the other 2 were clueless about the Dark Moon College exam. I have no personal experience with Dark Moon's exam. However, my roommate is from the Eastern region and did take their exam, although she did not pass. This filled Kane with anxiety. A student that passed the second-ranked Supernova's exam was unable to pass Dark Moon's. As I'm sure you know, the Eastern region has the largest expanse of forests and the most diverse range of spiritual creatures in its borders. Kane nodded, perfect for someone like me who has no idea what their affinity is. Bridget continued, due to the high amount of spiritual creatures in their vicinity, every few years a beast tide will occur. When the numbers of the spiritual creatures become too high for the environment to sustain, they attack human cities in search of food. My roommate said that for the entrance exam, their task was to endure the attacks from a beast tide while avoiding death, injuries too severe to continue fighting, or draining all of their energy. Apparently, less than 80 students out of thousands of applicants managed to achieve this. Kane immediately felt anxious. He's not even sure what his first contract will be. He has no idea if it'll be one suitable to survive a beast tide. She also mentioned another potential exam option. One that was given to her older sister 5 years ago. Dark Moon Academy possesses 4 relics, the second highest amount of all the top colleges, all of which do not allow contact with the outside world once you enter. Many of them also have age and/or strength restrictions that prevent instructors from following you for protection. Therefore, once you enter a relic, you are truly alone. In order to filter out prospective students for who could and could not survive their relics, the first level of one of their relics served as the site of their exam. All those that could pass were admitted. However, this admissions method was apparently discontinued because the death toll was too high. Less than 40 students passed that year, while nearly 600 students died. 600 students with ratings above B, who were the pride of their respective families, schools, and towns, died. After receiving this information, Kane was now very worried about his chances of being admitted as a beast tamer to Dark Moon College. Likely inspired by Kane's line of questioning, the others also asked for information regarding the entrance exams of the remaining 2 colleges. However, none of them could provide any information. Frozen Sun College is at the northern tip of the empire. It's rare for students outside of the northern region to apply there, Jeremy said in regards to the lowest ranking of the top 5 colleges. While the First Celestial Academy is in the capital, they rarely admit anyone outside of the central region, and most of their recruits are genius top legacies from old prestigious families, many of whom have amazing inherited affinities and even gifts that were further nurtured and refined by the old monsters in their families. Arlo, who before this information session seemed extremely confident, began to reveal some anxiety. What would you say is the average strength of students admitted into the top 5 colleges? Well, said Bridget, students that manage to get admitted one year with a bit of luck may not get admitted another year. It's helpful to have some information on these exams though, that way you could prepare for and target the one you feel suits you best and increase your chances. However, the top applicants like those I described for my year likely would be admitted no matter where and when they applied. Some years have more of such talented applicants than others. Although, I did hear that your year had an absolute genius among geniuses. Supposedly, they managed to awaken independently of the help from the affinity ceremony. The first one to do so in decades. Even among S-rated applicants, they must be at the absolute top. Although, they seem to be from one of the old families in the capital, so it's unlikely that any of you will run into them unless you apply for the First Celestial Academy. At least that's one monster I don't have to worry about, Kane and the others sighed in relief. Well, if there are no more questions, let's give our guests another round of applause. After the 3 graduates left, the principal turned to the high schoolers remaining. I've already spoken with your homeroom teachers. All students with an affinity can take the remaining month of school off until graduation so that they can prepare for the entrance exams at their chosen colleges. Since I'm assuming that you all are entering the beast taming major and not an academic major, this last month of academic review will be useless to you all. Excellent, that gives me time to act on some of the theories I had regarding my affinity. Given that the only time Kane felt a draw to a potential contract, it had ended up being a dead egg, he began to wonder if his affinity was related to the dead. Although an undead affinity shouldn't result in a large number of empty affinity eggs, Kane was grasping at straws, hoping that the empty eggs actually contained either invisible or ghost-type spiritual creatures. However, undead creatures are extremely rare, and finding invisible ghosts will be astronomically more difficult. Fortunately, Kane already had a lead. He heard rumors that one of the local mercenaries went crazy and is refusing to leave his home after seeing a ghost in the woods to the city's east. As for the source of this information, of course it was Cherry. The little gossip knows practically all of the news in the city. Hopefully, it doesn't get that brat into trouble one day, Kane thought. Kane packed a bag with a week's worth of food and water, a compass, camping gear, a first aid kit, and a long knife for self-defense. Thankfully, all high schools had mandatory combat classes for all 4 years. Hopefully, considering that he isn't venturing far from the city, he won't have a reason to use any of the techniques he learned. Hey Cherry. Come here for a sec. Kane beckoned her over after he left their home and saw her playing in the front yard. Bending down to her eye level once she came over, Kane then proceeded to pull out a map of the woods surrounding the city. Your big brother Kane wants to try and find the ghost-type spiritual creature you mentioned to me before. That mercenary that told you that scary story, do you happen to remember any of the details about where he saw that ghost in his story? Tilting the map towards her. No. Why would you want to go find that scary ghost, big brother Kane? What if it eats you? Because, Kane replied, making sure to adopt a soothing tone, that ghost may be super important for your brother. Also, your brother is now an official beast tamer. Not really, a measly ghost wouldn't be able to hurt me. Actually, a well-placed banana peel could hurt me, which is exactly why I need to fulfill my initial contract urgently. Really? Cherry asked hesitantly. Kane nodded. Well, I don't remember everything he said, but he did say that after slipping on a patch of wet mud while following along the river to the east, he fell into a hole in the ground. But the hole wasn't scary, it even had a hot tub. Do you mean a hot spring? Kane clarified. What's that? Well, it doesn't matter, please continue. He said that he began to swim in the hot tub and it felt amazing. However, after a while he said he heard a woman crying, and then a woman with straight black hair popped up from the water right next to him. And then? Kane probed after she fell into silence. And then he said that he got so scared he ran back to the city. Excellent. How long did he say it took him to return from that hot spring? That I know. He said he ran so fast he reached the city in only an hour. But I'm not sure if I have all of his story correct. You should ask him yourself. I would. But he's refusing to leave his home and turning away everyone who tries to meet with him. Everyone except Cherry, I guess. Thankfully the ghost doesn't seem to be too far from the city, I should be able to get there and back within a day. Thanks, Cherry. Kane turned to leave when he felt tiny arms wrap around his legs. Be safe. Muttered a tiny tearful voice. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Leaving the city gates alone, Kane was lamenting the fact that he could not afford to hire a mercenary as an escort. He also didn't have a contract yet, so he couldn't join a team. He could only pursue the ghost, his potential contract, alone. He decided to begin with the first clue he had regarding the ghost's location. He followed the river east. The mercenary also said he managed to run back to the city in a couple hours. His perception of time may not be that accurate due to his fear, but Kane was sure that the hot spring should not be more than a 6 hours walk in that direction. After all, 6 hours from the city there is a pretty noticeable landmark, a shift in the surrounding green vegetation to all crimson-leaved viper oak trees. He made no mention of that in his story, so he couldn't have gone that far. Long knife in hand, Kane followed the river at a slow pace. He had never felt as bare as he did at this moment. It was an extremely dangerous decision to leave the city without a contract, but he was getting desperate. Splash. Growl. After following the river for about an hour, Kane heard what sounded like a conflict between two wild beasts. Running behind a thick tree for cover, he looked towards the source of the sound. Next to the river ahead is a large feline with long protruding fangs and red-tinged fur, a blood cougar, thought Kane, one of the strongest black iron quality beasts. Wiggling around in its jaw was a squirming river python trying to break free, another black iron quality beast. Although only black iron quality, either one of them could probably kill me, I can't let them see me. Forced to move away from the river, Kane lost the greatest marker he had for his location. Fortunately, I packed a compass. But I don't know how far the entrance to that hot spring is from the river. Hopefully, I don't miss it by walking too far away. After walking another 30 minutes east, this time further from the river, Kane decided to stop to rest and eat. Pulling out an energy bar from his bag while sipping on water, he took out his journal and began noting any of the vegetation and scenery that may serve as a marker for the path he took in case he gets lost later on. Snap. I think I passed a blue maple tree, 5 minutes back. Those are pretty rare. Snap. Kane's head turned sharply towards the sound that was now much closer. And there, hidden among the trees he saw a blood cougar, likely the same one from earlier, steadily moving towards him. Seeing that he had spotted it, it immediately pounced towards him while Kane quickly ducked and rolled away to dodge. Unsheathing his knife from next to him, he tried to parry the cougar's next blow, but just grazing it blew him away and caused his arm to turn numb. This isn't going to work, he thought before turning around, leaving his supplies, and rushing towards the direction of the river. He made sure to not move in a straight line and weave between trees to obstruct his pursuer's path. Spotting the river ahead, Kane made a mad dash forward with no trees around him to obstruct the cougar. Splash. He dove headfirst into the water. Cougars are not known to be the strongest swimmers and have a general dislike for getting their fur wet. Hopefully, he's not hungry enough to try and come in here after me. After holding his breath for as long as he could, he popped his head up for some air and to look around. Instantly he spotted the piercing gold eyes boring straight into his soul. Shit. He thought, before ducking back down. Why is it still there? Swimming further away from the shore, Kane once again came up for air. It's still there. Suddenly he felt a stabbing pain as something wrapped around his ankle and pulled him under again. Looking down, he saw what looked to be a vine covered in sharp needles gripping into his flesh, as it dragged him slowly towards what looked like the gaping mouth of a Venus flytrap. Gripping his knife, he endured the intense pain still coming from his ankle and tried to cut away the vine. When he was almost out of breath, he finally managed to cut through and quickly swam to the surface again for air. Gasp. The river is no safer than land, I need to get out of here, he thought. But unfortunately, the cougar was still pacing along the shore while staring him down. Looking around, he spotted a floating piece of land covered in moss jutting out of the river. When did that get there? Not thinking any more about it, he swam towards his only hope and collapsed on its surface while breathing heavily. It was more spacious than he thought, large enough to fit 20 of him lying down. I'm surprised I missed it when I first jumped in. Looking at his ankle, he saw the disconnected portion of the vine still wrapped around it with needles digging deep into his flesh causing him pain. Carefully, he unwrapped vine while wincing in pain and the needle were removed. I could really use my first aid kit right about now. There was a bright red bruise left around his ankle, but thankfully nothing appeared broken. Kane took the opportunity to look around and catch his bearings. Thankfully he could still more or less tell his location. I think I'm only about 3 hours from the city wall. Today is officially the worst day of my life, he thought, before closing his eyes in exhaustion. Splash. Kane had closed his eyes for what felt like a minute, but the sky was already much dark, several hours must have passed. Also looking around, he could see that he was at a much further point down the river. A point he was unfamiliar with. More importantly, the patch of land he had fallen asleep on was beginning to sink into the water. Shit! He screamed, before using his knife to stab deep into the dirt and give himself something to hold on to. Soon, he sank fully into water, and the identity of his island was revealed. He was on the back of a massive turtle. From the pressure and size of the creature, he could tell that it was above yellow grade in strength. It was also likely above gold quality, since Kane had never seen it in any of his textbooks. He wanted to cry. I thought there weren't supposed to be any creatures above black iron quality so close to the city. Fortunately, it didn't seem to notice Kane's presence, or it didn't care, considering him to be like one of the tiny insects that occasionally hitch a ride onto its shell. After staying below water for what felt like an eternity, Kane desperately needed oxygen. With burning lungs he dislodged his knife, his only remaining possession, and floated in the direction he felt was up. Ah! Just when he felt as though he would faint from a lack of air, he finally broke the surface. However, looking around, he was no longer outside. His ride must have been swimming through the underwater tunnels of this cave. After crawling towards shore, Kane collapsed onto his back. It was almost pitch black, with only a little bit starlight peeking through a hole in the ceiling. He could see that he was in a circular cavern with stone walls all around, except for a tunnel in the direction he currently was. I guess I have no choice but to go down this tunnel. After all, he would likely drown if he tried to swim back out of these caves without his previous ride. However, without his supplies, Kane would not be able to see in front of him in the tunnel since the faint starlight above would definitely not reach that far. I guess I'll be flying blind then, he thought. He could either take a chance of finding an exit through these tunnels, or he could slowly die in this cavern. Without really being given a choice, he slowly stepped into the tunnel. Please don't let there be anything that wants to eat me down here, just give me a break. He prayed, before slowly stepping forward. After walking forward for several minutes, he gradually calmed down and began to extend his other senses since he could no longer rely on his sight. Hey! He pushed away what felt like a spider web. So gross, please tell me I'm not surrounded by spiders right now. Remaining calm was difficult, now that he was imagining a giant arachnid spiritual creature eyeing him from the dark. Stay calm. Stay calm. Tap tap tap. Hearing a noise in the distance, Kane gripped his blade tighter and then crouched along the side of the tunnel to take up less space while remaining quiet. Tap tap tap. Gradually he heard the scampering sound slowly moving away from him. Once the noise was completely gone, Kane stood again and began to make his way down the tunnel. Slowly. Silently. This isn't so bad, he thought after what felt like hours later, after not encountering anything else. Maybe I will be able to survive this. But it's been at least 12 hours since I ate anything. Even if nothing eats me, I may die from a lack of food and water. Whoosh. A breeze. He must be approaching an opening. Picking up the pace, Kane began to move in the direction he felt the breeze, and gradually began to see some details of the walls around him. I'm free. However, suddenly he stopped. Because despite the opening to the outside clearly right in front of him, he felt something he was longing for even more within the pitch-black tunnel towards his left. A pull. Looking longingly one last time at the exit, Kane turned towards the left. After all, this may be his last chance at finding a suitable contract before the admissions exam for Dark Moon College. Once again surrounded only by darkness, he at least had the sensation of the pull to direct him now. Gradually, he began to see light again through a small opening in the ceiling. Another cavern. And within this cavern was a steaming hot spring. It's you. Kane thought. The ghost in the hot spring must be what he is sensing. Looking around, Kane tried to see if he could see his future contract anywhere around the cavern. Hello. I know you're there. I don't mean you any harm, I just want to talk with you. Maybe we can even be friends. Silence. I know you've probably been alone for a while now, but don't be scared. I can ensure that you are never alone again. More silence. Seeing that the ghost wasn't coming out, Kane decided to focus on the sensation of the pull. It was drawing him strongly towards the hot spring. Beckoning him. I guess I have to go in there to see you. Kane said in trepidation. After all, although he knows that logically his contract may be an undead creature, he still hasn't fully wrapped his head around it. Asking him to share a hot bath with an undead creature is too much. Stripping down to only his underwear, Kane entered the water. Oh. This really does feel great. Kane took a moment to enjoy the warm water seeping into his skin, and leaned back against the wall of the cave. However, by the time his fingers were starting to shrivel up from being in the water too long, he still hadn't seen a glimpse of his potential contract. Feeling for the pull again, Kane tried to see if it had moved. Nope. Still in the water. Although it's hard to pinpoint where exactly. It feels like it's coming from all over. Dipping his below water, Kane decided to see if he could find anything below the surface. Surfacing for air and diving again at least a dozen times, Kane was still unable to find his contract. Come on, Kane, think. You are so close to finally becoming an official beast tamer. You can't give up now. He was about to continue diving when he noticed a very familiar pair of golden eyes in the dark. Pacing along the edge of the hot spring. No. No way. How could you follow me all the way here? Before Kane's eyes was his old foe, the blood cougar. Likely impatient after finally spotting its long-lost prey, it pounced at Kane from the shore into the hot spring. Ah. Kane fell back under the water to escape its claws. Swimming deeper, Kane turned around when he didn't feel its claws on him. Nothing. Wow, I guess it must really hate water. Kane thought, assuming that the cougar returned to land. After holding his breath as long as he could, he resurfaced and looked around in fear. Still nothing. Did it leave? Sob. Sob. Kane looked towards the sudden sobs he heard. Sitting against the side of the hot spring was an adorable little girl with blonde pigtails and sparkling brown eyes. Cherry. Why are you here? I got worried, so I went to look for you. You said you'd come back soon, but it's already been over a day. And look at you. You're injured, and when was the last time you'd eaten? How did you even get here, Cherry? We have to get you back quickly, it's not safe here. Kane immediately forgot about his first contract and moved to exit the hot spring. After all, Cherry was more important than a contract. There was only one Cherry, but surely he'd find another suitable contract eventually. However, the moment Kane stepped out of the hot spring, he was overcome by a wave of dizziness and nausea. He then felt a bubbling sensation in his stomach. Before he could move, Kane threw up the little contents remaining in his stomach all over Cherry. Or where Cherry had been, she had now disappeared. Just like the cougar. Calming down, Kane tried to think through the throbbing in his brain. He tried to think clearly. Kane wasn't an idiot, he was the top of his class for 4 straight years in the academic exams. He had just been too frazzled by the sudden appearance of Cherry to think. Hallucination. Does the ghost perhaps have a mental attribute? Or maybe there is no ghost, and she was also a hallucination the mercenary saw. I know they aren't real. You can't fool me anymore. Show yourself. Nothing. Stop playing with me and show yourself. Cain screamed while standing up in anger. Wrong decision. The moment he stood up, his vision began to blur as he lost his balance before collapsing back into the water with his eyes closed. Until the very end, the spiritual creature never revealed itself. Spiritual contract detected, system initializing. Compromised host condition detected, administering emergency electroshock therapy. Ah. Cough, cough, cough. Cain wheezed while spitting out all of the water he had swallowed. I'm alive. He said, patting down his body. I'm alive. Asterisk correct host. Congratulations on obtaining your first spiritual contract and activating the system asterisk. Ayaha ghost. Cain said, whipping his head around in search of the voice. Asterisk not a ghost. System asterisk. System. System. This thing had never responded in the decade he had had it. He was beginning to think that it didn't exist. Wait, you're activated, and you said I have a contract. Correct, please explore your first star space to make contact with your contract. Excited, Cain immediately closed his eyes. The star that was previously a mashup of pretty much any environment one could think of, now had a clear appearance. A hot spring. Did I contract a hot spring? Asterisk please do not be ridiculous host. One can only bind to living creatures with sufficient spiritual power, not inanimate objects. Your star has taken on the appearance of a hot spring because that is the most optimal environment for your contract, asterisk. I see. Cain examined his star again. I don't see anything other than a hot spring. Are you sure it's in there? Asterisk I am sure. You can summon it if you would like further confirmation asterisk. Cain closed his eyes to concentrate it and tried to do as directed by the system, pulling an object at the end of his spiritual power outside of his body. Once he sensed its presence in front of him, his eyes snapped open. Still nothing. Where is it? Did I actually even make a contract? I thought I'd have to be awake to direct the formation of the contract. I also didn't cut my hand. Asterisk not true. Because white-grade spiritual power in humans and spiritual creatures is weak, bodily fluid is needed as a medium. This is unnecessary as your strength increases. Regardless, all of the conditions to establish a contract were fulfilled. It had very intimate contact with you when it entered your body asterisk. It did what? Cain shouted, feeling violated. Asterisk and additionally, neither party rejected the contract. You, because you were unconscious. It, because it sensed a suitable living environment for itself within you that it instinctively made its way towards. Resulting in a contract asterisk. So where is it? Is it still in me? Cain asked in trepidation. After all, a creature living in the star space within his body is different from it swimming through his veins. Asterisk no. After the contract was established, it, and all of its derivatives were absorbed into your star space. Once summoned, it appeared outside of your body, in the water surrounding you. Perhaps exploring the system's features will be better able to answer your questions asterisk. Of course, now that the system has finally activated, he could get used to its help. No longer forced to do everything on his own. System open. Show me what you've got. He shouted into the air. Asterisk there is no need to shout. Simply think what you would like for me to do, and I will read those thoughts asterisk. Kind of an invasion of privacy, but I guess that's convenient. Cain thought while silently asking the system to show him its features once again. Immediately a window with several options appeared in front of him. Most of which were blurred out. The only available selection was the host status icon. I guess this is about me. Selecting the only available option, Cain was brought to a screen showing a 3D scan of his body, along with his height, weight, and other health indicators. Interestingly, it has also quantified his spiritual power. That's convenient. Usually, people just have to keep absorbing their spiritual power while only having a vague indication when they are approaching saturation and can begin forming their next star. This thing tells me exactly how much spiritual power I currently have and how much more I need to become a 2-star beast tamer. Currently it read 150 out of 1000 SP. Cain had not been able to absorb any more spiritual power since reaching saturation and condensing his first star. A level he's assuming to be 100 SP. Now, after establishing his first contract, he can continue absorbing more already. While asleep, it already looks as though he absorbed another 50 SP. This is why I needed to form a contract as soon as possible. Every day without a contract is another day I cannot absorb more spiritual power and fall further behind my peers. Most of his awakened classmates have probably already passed the 300 SP by now, even those with the worst talent. Focusing on the contracts icon next to his 3D avatar, Cain was brought to another screen. Finally, I'll get some answers. Just what are you? Cain thought while looking at the blue blob with a darker blue circle in the center like an eye. Cain thought he would instantly have a sense of affection for his contract, like Bridge, but it's ugly. Really, really ugly. However, something about it felt familiar. If this is how it looks, why can't I see it? Maybe the host should look more closely at its information. After receiving the hint, Cain immediately looked at its basic information and was taken aback by its size. 15 micrometers. That's microscopic, Cain muttered in shock. Microscopic, wait, don't tell me. Cain's stomach began to sink. Cain's mind flashed back to his awakening ceremony. I would love to have an undead affinity right now. The undead are great. Just please don't tell me that all of those seemingly empty eggs were actually full of microscopic organisms. That is correct, host . Cain wanted to break down in tears. Maybe back on his previous Earth, bacteria and viruses could be powerful weapons, but in this world where even children have managed to absorb at least a little spiritual power, most microbes that could cause disease were considered harmless. Cain doesn't even think the people of this world are fully aware of the existence of microbes. Why would they be when there are the much more interesting spiritual creatures to study and diseases are practically unheard of? The fact that Cain's contract even possesses enough spiritual power to alter the mental state of awakened individuals and form a contract with him is an anomaly. He doesn't hold out much hope in being able to find another. How could this kind of affinity get an S rating? Cain said despondently. Until this moment he had been holding out hope that his affinity was for some kind of rare and powerful creature, which is what that machine was sensing, but how could this kind of affinity receive an S rating? Human's method of assessing potential encompasses both the strength of the contract creature, as well as the number of types of creatures one can bind. There is no affinity more broad than yours. All microorganisms. That includes all the types of bacteria, viruses, amoebas, archaea, fungi and more that are too small to see with the naked eye. Great. So I can bind thousands of varieties of useless creatures too weak to actually have any combat effectiveness. Awesome. Although most microorganisms do not possess much, if any, spiritual power, there are always exceptions like the one you contracted. As someone from a planet that has been repeatedly ravaged throughout history by plagues and pandemics, you more than anyone in this world should be aware of their potential. With the power of evolution, even black iron quality beasts could reach a much higher level. Most microorganisms are already incredibly susceptible to mutating. With this system's help, you can surely still achieve all you've dreamed of. No, I can't, thought Cain disheartened. How could I be satisfied when everybody else has bound companions that they can hold, communicate with, hug, and love? Companions that could carry them into the sky or to the depths of the ocean. Can my contract even think? Feel? It'll definitely never be able to carry me. The host should take a closer look at your contract. I think that with time you will come to be amazed by the potential of your affinity. Nickname, not applicable. Species, brain-eating amoeba, BEA. A rare microorganism typically found in warm freshwater bodies such as hot springs. When a host enters its waters, it typically enters through the nasal cavity in swimmers and moves towards the brain. Early symptoms of infection include headache, fever, nausea, blurred vision, and fainting. Later may include seizures and hallucinations. The fatality rate in infected at or below the brain-eating amoeba's spiritual power is 97%. Quality, bronze. Spiritual power grade, white, 232/1000 SP. Type, microorganism, amoeba. Attribute, water, mental. Skills. A rapid proliferation. When entering bodies of water, BEA can rapidly divide, producing thousands of progeny within seconds that can be controlled by the parent cell. A brain infection, once inside a host BEA, can make its way to a suitable host's brain to cause almost certain death in creatures of equal and lower spiritual power. Symptoms, but not death, will be triggered in infected with spiritual power up to 1 grade higher. B. Seamless integration. Once entering a fluid, BEA integrates perfectly with the surrounding environment, becoming completely undetectable to creatures with a spiritual power up to 1 grade higher. C. Capsule formation. Under harsh conditions such as extreme temperatures and acids, BEA forms a resilient capsule to prevent death. Once activated, no other skills can be used. Cain was pleasantly surprised. Shocked really. Bronze quality. 2 A-level skills. Usually only the most talented of the silver quality spiritual creatures had an A-level skill, and usually only one. His contract had 2. Maybe it has to do with the fact that it is a rare mental attribute spiritual creature. Creatures with a mental affinity are usually not below gold quality. They are also one of the hardest to defend against. Moreover, its B-level skill isn't too shabby, allowing it to sneak up on even red-grade spiritual beasts and 2-star beast tamers. That mercenary was probably a 2-star. That's probably why the mercenary was affected but didn't die, yet had no idea what really happened to him here. Maybe I can make this work, Cain thought. Feeling, for the first time in a while, some optimism for the future. Now that I've got a contract, I guess I should give you a name, Cain muttered, finally feeling some semblance of affection for his first contract. I actually kind of like the acronym for your species, BEA. I will call you B from now on. Now that I got what I came here for, I guess I can head back home now. Cain headed back in the direction of the exit after recalling B with a pep in his step. Following his steps back toward where he saw the exit, Cain took a step outside. He was back in the familiar woods to his city's east. I entered these woods no stronger than an ordinary person, and I'm leaving as an official beast tamer. Cain looked at the sky. The sun looked as though it had just finished rising, meaning that he had officially been out here for 1 full day. Based on the direction of the morning sun, Cain headed west, back in the direction of his home. The trip back home was much more relaxing than the one coming from the city. This must be the comfort having a spiritual contract provides. Although he logically knew he wasn't significantly stronger than before, he definitely felt a lot safer than he did previously. Less naked and vulnerable. Snap. Cain whipped his head around in the direction of the sound. Snap. To the left. Turning that way, Cain still didn't see anything. However, he could sense that there was something there. Watching him. Circling him. Then finally in the dark he saw a pair of familiar gold eyes. This time it wasn't a hallucination. You again. This time I'm not defenseless. Cain immediately summoned B. Only to realize that although B is pretty overpowered against red grade and below creatures, she's pretty much useless outside of water, with no way to actually infect the host. Crap. Cain thought before bolting. The river. I need to get to the river. Moving as fast as possible, Cain moved in the direction he thought the river was. Thankfully, all of the wilderness survival courses we were forced to take in school developed our sense of direction. Otherwise, I wouldn't know which way was up. As he ran, Cain could already feel the difference in his body after he made a contract and was able to pass the blockade of 100 SP. It wasn't a huge difference. He found it easier to weave between the trees to avoid capture. He also would have probably been out of breath by now. Damn. Where is it? The river isn't supposed to be far from where the hot spring is. Hearing the sound of running water, he made a sharp veer to the right. There. Making a mad dash towards the river, he dove headfirst into the water. Fortunately, this time he has some defense against what may lurk in these waters, although carnivorous plants like the one he ran into previously are still a threat. He immediately released B into the surrounding waters and could immediately sense as her splits. Yes, he decided that B was a her, spread to cover at least 10 square meters of water in his vicinity within seconds. Ha ha ha. I'd love to see you come in here after me now. Nothing with a brain will be able to touch me. Once again, the cougar remained on shore while pacing back and forth staring at him. Come on. You hungry? I promise you that I will be the tastiest thing you've ever eaten. Cain yelled, trying to tempt the cougar into the river. Growling. It didn't seem to be falling for his antics. Once again Kane was reminded of BEA's limitations. If it doesn't enter the water, he's out of luck. He's also not confident enough that just a quick splash with water will give B enough access. Damn it. How do I make myself more tempting? Should I undress? Maybe add in some innocent doe eyes like a helpless prey. I've never had to seduce a human before, much less a spiritual beast. Crash. Suddenly a giant wave formed, pushing Kane towards shore. In the direction of the cougar. Thankfully it seemed to also be trying to run out of the range of the wave. Although it was unsuccessful. As the cougar became drenched in water, Kane could sense from B that her splits were successful in entering the cougar. It's done. Relaxing, Kane spun around to see what caused the tsunami. A giant turtle with a landmass on its shell. Haha. You've helped me twice now, intended or not. You must really be my lucky star. Slash. Vaguely sensing a warning transmitted from B, Kane immediately ducked down. You're still not down yet. B, is there any way you could speed up the process? Kane prompted while dodging another attack. Sensing a negative signal from her that her split had just entered its brain and that it would take some time, Kane turned his other new companion. System. Any help you can provide? Asterisk apologies. The host has not yet earned access to the majority of the system's features asterisk. So I only have access to a stupid status menu. You're still useless just now you talk to me. Asterisk the system's capabilities are dependent on the host. Please continue to work hard smiley face asterisk. The response further irritated Kane. Especially the emoticon that felt like it was mocking him. Ugh. I guess can only wait this out. Fortunately, gradually the cougar's movements began to slow down, making it easier for Kane to dodge. Finally, it stopped attacking and tried to run away before collapsing to the ground. No longer having to focus on dodging, Kane could spare some of his energy to watch the effects of BEA's skill. Approaching it, but still staying out of its attack range, Kane could see it glaring up at him in rage, but there was also fear in its eyes. I guess you never thought the hunter would turn into the hunted, huh? However, Kane eventually decided to put it out of its misery, stabbing straight into its forehead for a quick ending. Asterisk ding. Host has killed one white-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 1 GP asterisk. GP. What's GP? Asterisk GP is the currency of the system. You can use it to upgrade the system to unlock other features as well as spend it for a variety of uses once you unlock said features asterisk. Great. Maybe once I upgrade you, I can finally get some help around here, Kane said rolling his eyes. How much GP do I need to upgrade you? Upgrading the system from level 0 to 1 will require you to spend 100 GP. Kane's brow immediately twitched. 100 GP, that's 100 white-grade beasts that I would need to kill. Just one of those things could kill me. Looking at the corpse in front of him, Kane was suddenly reminded of another point in training. Blood cougar fangs and claws can be used to make weapons, while their soft yet difficult to penetrate red coats can be used to make luxury clothes that those legacies adore. Brandishing his wife, he immediately got to work. Rolling up the fangs and claws in the fur coat, Kane attempted to lift it. Damn. This is way heavier than I expected. System. I don't suppose you have anything like a storage space. Please work hard, host, to unlock more of the system's capabilities. Figured you'd be no help. Kane muttered before putting the rolled up fur over his shoulder and making his way slowly back to the city. Fortunately, the rest of the journey back home was uneventful. After stopping by a shop next to the gates targeting the materials brought back by mercenaries, Kane was finally able to get rid of the materials from the cougar he had. 12,000 celestial dollars. A mere black iron beast was able to earn me almost as much as Bridge saved up after 3 years of part-time farm work. Now I understand better why everyone in this world is so desperate to awaken. The ease at which even the lowest one-star beast tamers can earn money is incomparable to ordinary people. Although the cost of caring for contracts is also astronomical. Although, what exactly would the care and evolution plan for BB? I don't think anyone's ever had a contract like her before. Asterisk that will be up to the host to figure out. Out of everyone in this world, the host is probably the most knowledgeable about microbes asterisk. Yeah, my 3 years of college-level biology totally makes me an expert. Kane said while rolling his eyes. Asterisk, asterisk. Even the system was unable to provide any more words of comfort. This sucks. Once Kane arrived home, the first thing he did was take a hot shower before jumping into bed. He hadn't been able to sleep at ease without fear of a sudden attack in over 24 hours, so as soon as his head hit the pillow he went off into dreamland. However, after what felt like only closing his eyes for a brief moment, he was violently slapped awake by Bridge. "You're back. You're back. When we heard from Cherry that you went into the wilderness without a contract, we were all so terrified. Why wouldn't you take me with you?" he yelled while wrapping him in a hug. Feeling Bridge shaking, Kane didn't have the heart to yell at him for waking him up. "You had just formed a contract a few days ago, you'd not be much safer than me out there. If I'm going to put myself in danger, I'm not going to drag you down with me," Kane said while patting Bridge's back. "Well, it doesn't look like he'll let me go back to sleep right away. I might as well go get some food. When's dinner? I'm starving. Right now. You looked exhausted so I didn't wake you up earlier, but I figured you'd want to eat." Kane looked to find it completely dark outside. I guess he had gotten to sleep longer than he felt. "When I told everyone earlier that you were back, they immediately started working together to prepare your favorite hot pot?" Kane asked hopefully. After Bridge nodded, Kane immediately ran downstairs, no longer tired. Really, the things that come out of his mind are both great and strange. "This hot pot he came up with is delicious, but I don't know why he insists we eat it with sticks," Bridge muttered before following after Kane. Entering the dining room, Kane saw that everyone, including their neighbors, was already seated around a large table waiting for him. A delicious smell was coming from a large pot at the center of the table while a variety of ingredients were washed and cut on plates next to it. Immediately Kane used chopsticks to pick up a piece of meat and dip it into the soup. He could barely even wait for it to fully cook before stuffing it into his mouth. Reaching for another piece, his hand was suddenly smacked by the director, hard. "Go wash your hands. I let one slide because you looked like a starving stray cat, but no more." "Ah, sorry." Kane quickly scampered off to wash his hands as he heard muffled giggles behind him. Once Kane returned, he immediately sat down obediently, looking at the director. "Did you find what you needed?" Director Silas asked. Everyone turned to look at Kane in anticipation. Kane nodded with a big grin. "Good," the director nodded, before everyone began to stuff their faces. After getting a full stomach and a good night's rest, Kane woke up happily the next morning. Surprisingly, Bridge wasn't in the bed next to him. I thought he stopped working at the farm for now to prepare for the entrance tests. That lazy guy never gets up early on a weekend otherwise." However, soon the loud shouts coming from the yard answered Kane's question. "How's training lady going?" Kane asked once he joined Bridge outside. "Not bad. She's a hard worker and we've managed to graduate from beginner to practiced proficiency for one of her moves in only a few days." That reminded Kane. He should also work on BEA's proficiency. As the proficiency of her skills increases, maybe it won't take as long to take down enemies in the future. They may also unlock new effects or graduate to a higher skill grade. However, most of BEA's skills are not easy or safe to practice in the city. He will need to go back out into the wild. It'll also give him an opportunity to collect more GP and upgrade the system. With that in mind, Kane headed back upstairs to write down his plan of action for the next 5 weeks until the entrance exam at Dark Moon. After confirming what his affinity was, Kane was faced with a problem. Given that his affinity, as far as he is aware, is completely unheard of, he would not be able to rely on the expertise of an experienced evolutionary planner to help him. He also wasn't sure if he wanted to ever disclose his affinity to others. It'd make it a lot easier to target his shortcomings. Therefore, despite still preparing for the Beast Tamer admissions exams in 5 weeks' time, he also planned to take the academic exam in a month to enter the evolutionary planning major. Although double majors are rare, they are not unheard of. And given Kane's unique circumstances, he needed the resources of the beast taming major to increase his strength, but he also needed the knowledge of a planner to figure out an evolution for B, and any of his other future contracts. This is going to be a real tiring month, Kane thought. After all, he is attempting to enter the 2 most competitive majors at a top 5 college. He will need to be among the top applicants in both combat and academics to have even a shot at achieving his goals. I'm pretty confident in my academic performance, and have consistently scored within the top 1% in the nation for previous mock exams. The most urgent thing is to increase BEA's strength. BEA's major shortcomings are her limited methods of being able to enter a host, needing to have contaminated water enter their nose, eyes, mouth, or wounds. No water, no infection. However, I don't see any immediate method of being able to overcome this shortcoming by the time of the exam, so I will focus on BEA's second weakness, the speed at which she can kill a host. If the Dark Moon entrance exam is in fact a beast tide, I can't exactly wait 5 to 10 minutes as I'm overrun with beasts for BEA's split to stop them. The time from infection to incapacitation must be brought down to a few seconds. As Kane looked at BEA's status window, he noticed something else of interest. System: what was BEA's spiritual power immediately after we formed a contract? Answering host: it was 232 SP. What about before we fell asleep last night? It was 245 SP. Kane turned to look at BEA's current level of spiritual power and suddenly had a headache. It was exactly 245 SP, completely unchanged after a night of rest in the star space. After entering the star space, the absorption of spiritual power should be much higher than when outside. The contract being mutually beneficial for both parties in increasing the rate at which the spiritual power rises. This is why a contract with high potential is so important, as it can greatly impact the speed of the beast tamer's growth. Typically, a beast with high potential will have an increase of 10 SP a day, even without active absorption, just by staying in the star space. A contract with average potential would absorb around 5 SP a day passively. However, after an entire night of rest, BEA's spiritual power did not increase by even 1 SP. But, in the time between forming the contract and going to bed, BEA's SP increased by 13, at the level of those with the highest levels of talent. So what happened between the time of the contract and going to sleep? Staring contemplatively at BEA's status window, Kane was suddenly drawn to the species name, brain-eating amoeba. Don't tell me that the nutritional source B needs for growth are brains. Kane thought, feeling nauseous. Asterisk host is correct. The fresher the better asterisk. Kane took that statement to mean that B needed to consume brains that were still in a living host. Although sickening, Kane did have to admit that this was quite convenient for his training plans. B can train her skills while also increasing her own SP and obtaining GP to use upgrading the system. Looks like I won't be able to spend that much time at home in the future, Kane thought. Before beginning to pack another bag with all of the supplies he had lost previously. Thankfully, the bruising around his ankle had pretty much healed and no longer hurt. Ah, the perks of having spiritual power. Although it wasn't a deep injury, it would have taken him at least a week to fully heal from it back on Earth. It looks like I'm almost ready to go. However, there's still a couple more things I want to buy in the city. Kane had never had so much money to spare before, a whopping 22,000 CD when combining his previous earnings working as a tutor with the 12,000 CD he earned yesterday from selling the Cougar parts yesterday. Previously, he hadn't been able to afford even the most basic soft armor. However, now he should be able to afford at least something. Maybe even one with decent quality or high quality if it's already used. Making his way into town, Kane headed towards the commercial district. Due to a lack of funds, he had rarely come here, but now he was amazed at how many stores there were that targeted beast tamers. Pharmacies, weapons shops, training centers, and more. Heading over to a local armory that among the local mercenaries was rumored to have the most reasonably priced equipment, thanks again Cherry for that information, Kane hesitantly stepped through the door. He could see a variety of weapons and armor in racks as well as all along the walls. Where do I even start? He ended up pausing in stupefaction long enough that an employee thankfully took pity on him. Can I help you? Asked a large older man with a long shaggy gray beard. He's likely a blacksmith. Kane thought, looking at the man's red and weathered skin. Why yes. I am looking for a suitable soft armor. He said, squinting he already beady eyes while looking Kane up and down. High schooler. 1 star. What's you budget? Kane nodded before answering with the total amount of his savings. You can't cheapen out on safety. Follow me before leading the way towards a rack of soft armor near the front of the door. I'm assuming this is an armor you will be using to explore wilderness around here. Therefore, you don't really need one with cold-resistant insulation. Other special features such as being lightning or fireproof are also not necessary. Both of those attributes are extremely rare in our immediate surroundings. I would recommend you buy one of these 3-inch, the blacksmith said, holding up a black, a brown, and a dark blue armor. This one, he Largeman said while holding up the black one, is made from the hide of a bronze-quality iron ursa, offering exceptional defense. Although it is a quite heavy, most white-grade attacks, and even the average red-grade ones would find it difficult to penetrate it. Cain picked up the black soft armor and almost tipped over from the weight. Can anyone actually wear this? This is likely only a high schooler of Bridges' size could wear. Cain shook his head. It's too heavy for me. I fight using my agility more than raw strength. I figured, he said, looking at Cain's leanly muscled arms. These may second be more what you're looking for. He then held up the brown armor. Looking closely, Cain could see that it had a slight green tinge as well as scales made from the skin of bitter ground lizards. They are lightweight and durable, although not as protective as the previous one I showed you. Also, because they are made from bitter sand lizards, they are resistant to corrosive poisons. Bitter sand lizards are bronze-quality lizards that live in tunnels underground, typically in sandy desert regions. Their skin constantly secretes a mildly corrosive poison that makes all of the ground in an area have a slightly bitter taste. Although, most people just take the textbook's word for it and didn't actually taste it for themselves. Lastly, he said, pointing to the blue armor, this one is made from a bronze-quality scavenger shark. Therefore, it has a similar durability and lightweight as the brown armor I showed you, while also offering excellent water resistance. You will feel just as light in the water as you do on land. Scavenger sharks are quite common bronze-quality beasts. Also, despite being sharks, they rarely choose to hunt for prey, instead choosing to scavenge for food on the ocean floor. How much do the brown and blue armors each cost? The blue one is 19,000 CD while the other, because sand lizards are less common to find, will be 21,000 CD. Cain's heart bled. Either one of them would end up bleeding majority of his savings. He once again realized how expensive the beast tamer profession was. However, he didn't agonize over his decision for long. There weren't many creatures with a corrosive-type poison in the area and, given BEA's characteristics, Cain planned to do the majority of his hunting in and around the river. The fact that it was cheaper was also a nice bonus. I will take the scavenger shark soft armor. After making a decision and paying with the account tied to his ID card, Cain didn't immediately leave. He had an idea to deal with BEA's other limitation, a water gun. After explaining his idea to the blacksmith, he gave him a strange look. It's not too difficult to make what you asked. However, most people that order a projectile weapon want it to shoot arrows or bullets, not water. Is this for a child to play with? Cain coughed. My contract is poisonous. Not technically true, but that's the easiest way to describe B. I was hoping to shoot the poison at targets from far away. The man stroked his beard, contemplating the feasibility of the idea, but looked skeptical. Is your poison able to exert an effect once it makes contact with the skin? No. I see. So it needs to be ingested or get in through some other opening in the body. Do you have an aim good enough to hit rapidly moving targets from far away and aim precisely at the eyes, nose, or open mouths or wounds? No. Realizing that most spiritual creatures are significantly more quick and agile than him. He also doesn't have any experience holding a gun from his past life or in the combat training he received in this life. I think I have a better idea. The men brought Cain to the back of the store. The weapons and armor here were all of a noticeably higher quality than the ones at the front. They also all had markings of abstract symbols. They stopped before a dark red spear with intricate markings all along the shaft. One of the apprentices in my shop designed this spear recently. It is enchanted with a sigil meant to inject a stored poison into the stabbed target once infused with spirit power. An enchanted weapon. Armors and weapons sigils that can exert a variety of effects when triggered by the user's spiritual power. The effect described for this spear seems quite simple, but making even the simplest enchanted weapon takes a huge amount of talent and skill. A mere apprentice made this one. Unfortunately, considering Cain could just barely afford an ordinary soft armor, there's no way he'd be able to purchase the spear, no matter how appealing it is. But it really is perfect for me. Although I mostly use knives, I have some experience with spears from class. I can become more proficient with practice in time for the entrance exam. Also, being able to directly inject B into the target is a much more foolproof method than a water gun. Especially since I would only need to cut them and not fatally wound them to achieve victory. Perhaps seeing Kane's awkward expression, he guessed the problem. I assume you are going into the wilderness soon, correct? Kane nodded. Then I will give this spear to you as an advance payment if you can complete a task for me. Kane wanted to immediately agree and grab the precious spear, however thankfully he was able to calm down and hear the conditions beforehand. After all, this sounds way too good to be true. What task can be worth an enchanted weapon? I need you to hunt armadillos for me, at least 3 in order to make an armor I'm planning. Why would you be asking a high school student like me, rather than hiring a mercenary? Well, as I'm sure you know, armadillos have a defense that's pretty impenetrable by attacks at the same level. Heck, even an orange-grade attack will likely not even leave a scratch on an armadillo when it's curled up. Therefore, to hunt one of them requires a decent poison that is also not corrosive and will weaken the shell. You happen to meet both conditions. Kane contemplated. Armadillos are a bronze-quality beast, and typically have condensed red-grade spiritual power by the time they've reached adulthood. However, despite being a whole grade above him and B, Kane wasn't too threatened. Despite their incredible defense, even adult armadillos don't normally have any attack skills, preferring to just curl up when they see a predator. Therefore, Kane wouldn't likely be in any danger when facing them. The only issue is that armadillos are pretty rare and there is no guarantee he can even find one, much less 3 of them. I wouldn't know where to begin looking. Kane began hesitantly. Don't worry about that, the blacksmith said, waving a hand nonchalantly. I have pretty accurate intel on where a family of 5 of them were recently spotted. I'll even let you borrow a space ring from me. It doesn't have much space, about 1 cubic meter, but it should be able to squeeze in 3 fully grown dillo shells plus whatever basic supplies you bring. Deal. Concerns all taken care of, Kane excitedly agreed. I even get to rent a space ring for free. After they signed a contract with the terms of their agreement, Kane was then handed the ring already containing the spear, and the map with the location of the armadillo family. Before being escorted to the door. Kane said while looking at the map, they are on the other side of the river. Yup. It's your responsibility to figure out how to get across. Bang. The door was slammed inches from Kane's face before the open sign was flipped to closed. I guess I should be happy to even receive an enchanted weapon, map, and space ring. If he had to provide me with any more help, then he really would probably just be better off hiring a professional mercenary. Kane ran his hands through his black hair in embarrassment before turning to head back home. I wonder what's for dinner. Kane woke up the next day satiated and well-rested. Now is as good a time as ever to head out. He was wary of long drawn-out goodbyes and a ton of tears being spilled, mostly from Bridge, so he decided to just leave a note on his bed before heading out just as the sun was beginning to rise. Thankfully, nobody was up yet. After exiting the gate with a large pack of supplies on his back, he glanced around to make sure he was properly covered by the vegetation before emptying his bag into the ring. Still choosing to carry the now empty bag on his back. Not carrying anything out here is suspicious. Anyone with half a brain would guess that I have a space ring and start seeing me as a walking pile of celestial dollars. If anyone tries to rob me, I can't exactly shout for enforcement officers out here. His current plan was to stay out in the wilderness for a week to maximize efficiency. Considering that he packed enough supplies for 2 weeks, then he shouldn't run the risk of running out. Taking his new weapon out of the storage space to be ready in case of any sudden attacks, Kane headed deeper into the forest. It should only take 2, maybe 3 days to locate the armadillo family. I can spend 4 days focused on training B. Last time he went to sell the cougar parts by the gate, he saw that there was an exchange window containing up-to-date information on where some of the more dangerous spiritual creatures inhabit. For a hefty price, of course. Now he only had around 100 CD to his name. Despite the cost, I wish I had this the last time I went out. Knowledge really is power. It looks like I got quite lucky the last time I was here. Kane shivered, realizing that the hot spring was very close to a label indicating the nest of an orange-grade white widow spider. Let's stay away from here, here, and here. Kane said after looking at the different orange-grade skulls on the map and deciding on a safe direction. After an hour of walking, Kane located a suitable target. A spiritual beast that looked like a brown water buffalo with brilliant golden horns. A daylight buffalo, a fire attribute black iron quality spiritual beast. They absorb energy from the sun to make their horns hot enough to melt iron. However, if kept at a distance they're not a threat. It's been a while since I used a spear. I hope I'm not too rusty. However, with B I don't exactly need to fight fair, he thought slyly while creeping up silently behind the buffalo. Swoosh. Once within range, he immediately stabbed into its side while imbuing his spiritual power into the spear to release B into the wound. Its hide is thick so he couldn't make a deep wound, but that's enough, he thought slyly. B, it's up to you now. Ayo. Seeing its attacker, the daylight buffalo let an enraged roar before charging headfirst at Kane with glowing horns. Kane could feel the heat from several feet away. Fortunately, right after stabbing forward he got a head start and began running. He made sure to constantly change directions as he ran. The buffalo was used to charging in a straight line and had to keep stopping before turning to chase after him again. Finally, he no longer felt a scalding heat behind him. He took a peek back and saw the buffalo standing still on shaking legs. Finally. I was about to collapse from exhaustion, he said, while collapsing on the ground. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the stopwatch he had started right after stabbing the buffalo. 5 minutes and 43 seconds, he read out while breathing heavily. That is way too long, B. Kane stabbed it through the head to put it out of its misery as fast as possible. Ding. Host has killed one white-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 1 GP*. Sigh. Kane was tired, but he knew it was best to extract the materials as soon as possible before a predator is drawn by the smell of blood. Thankfully it didn't take long since the only material of significant value was the horns. The rest of the body may not add up to even half their value. After storing the horns in the space ring, Kane left the scene. Just in time, as he heard wolf howls coming from the direction he just left behind mere minutes later. An hour later Kane was hiding behind a bush while staring at his next prey. Jackpot. Each white-grade beast only gave Kane 1 GP. He could work hard honestly and slowly kill one spiritual creature at a time until he met the requirements. However, only a fool would choose such a slow and arduous method. And Kane was no fool. He was a firm believer of work smarter, not harder. Lounging all over a giant rock was a pack of gray berserk coyotes, at least 15. White-grade. As he stared at the pack, a plan hatched in Kane's mind. The river was about a 5-minute sprint southeast of this rock, and Kane planned to lure this whole pack into the river. When he has tried this trick on the cougar in the past, it didn't work. It remained pacing on the shore. However, these coyotes have a crucial feature to ensure the plan's success: they are extremely dumb. True to their name, once enraged they will chase their target to the ends of the earth. Into a poisonous marsh, a volcano, or even off of a cliff, they will follow without a second thought, much less into a river. He just needs to find a way to enrage all of them, and the most foolproof method was to find the pack leader. After watching the pack for a while, he found him. A silver coyote with red chest hair, unlike the white of the others, to signify his spiritual power grade. This will be the first red-grade beast that he faced. Although he was nervous, he didn't feel as though it was not that risky as long as he got a head start, and if he managed to slow down the leader's speed a bit. Staying concealed in a nearby bush, Kane waited for the perfect opportunity. The leader finally left his perch and walked to a bush not far from Kane to relieve his bladder. Kane took out his trusty long knife from the space ring and gently stroked the handle in reminiscence. "Goodbye, old friend, you've been a real one," he said before whipping his arm to throw it deep into one of its hind legs. Whoa. Kane immediately stood up from his hiding spot so that the entire pack could see him before making a mad dash for the river. He could immediately hear angry growls and dozens of feet chasing after him. Damn, they're fast, he thought as he dodged a swipe from behind. Thankfully, I already made a plan to slow you all down, he thought, before jumping over a thin wire suspended slightly off of the ground. A wire that is a necessary component for suspending his camping tent. Hopefully it doesn't snap. I don't exactly want to sleep outside tonight. Hearing multiple thuds behind him, he knew the plan was successful. Oh! Looks like I just enraged them even more, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Seeing the river up ahead, Cain dove happily into the water, feeling as though he was falling into his mother's embrace. Since binding B, being in the water feels like the safest place for me in the world. He had already placed B into this portion of the river earlier to give her ample time to spread out her splits. Splash crash splash whoa. Once in the water, Cain began to backstroke leisurely as he watched the coyotes chasing him into the water. Haha, you're really not great at swimming, are you? He laughed while watching them flail about in the water. Cain was still a little worried about outswimming them if they were strong swimmers, but it seemed his worries were for nothing. Cain was already at least 10 meters from shore while they were still splashing about at most 5 meters in. Cain continued to dodge them leisurely until he started to see the first ones stop chasing him. Some looked to be unconscious, others were whimpering in pain, one appeared to be having a seizure, while 2 actually turned and started attacking each other, likely trapped in a hallucination. Ding. Host has killed 1 white-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 1 GP Ding. Host has killed 1 white-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 1 GP Ding. Host has killed 1 white-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 1 GP Cain listened to the sweet sound of his GP going up. Whimper. After all of the system notifications ended, the only thing Cain heard was the painful whimpers of the pack leader. It was impossible for B to kill him completely, so he swam over while it was dizzy and distracted by the pain and stabbed his spear deeply into its forehead. Ding. Host has killed 1 red-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 5 GP Phew. He was exhausted, but still couldn't rest. He gathered as many of the floating bodies as he could and dragged them to shore. They were all money after all. 3 had been taken away by the current further down the river, but he was able to collect 12 bodies, plus the leader. I need to buy a space ring, he thought. Getting completely used to the comforts of being able to easily bring back heavy extracted materials. To save space, he only took the claws and teeth of all the coyotes but also took the fur of the leader. If the fur of a black iron, white-grade cougar could get me that much money, a bronze quality, red-grade pelt from this leader must be worth a fortune. Seeing that the sun was already beginning to set, Cain realized that he's already been in the wilderness for over 12 hours. It's not safe to hunt at night without a nocturnal contract. B is also not the type of contract I can use as a guard while I rest. Cain was suddenly struck with worry about the safety of actually camping out here. He went back to where he set his trap, only to be disappointed that the wire he needed for his tent had in fact broken from the charge of the coyotes. Sigh. Cain looked around for an idea, before settling on climbing a tree close to the river with branches hanging over the water. It had branches that looked thick enough to easily support a fully grown man. This is probably the safest option for me. Most creatures on land wouldn't try to climb a branch hanging over the river by chance. Also, this branch is high enough that no aquatic creature should be able to catch me from jumping out the water. Also, if I do get attacked in my sleep, I will fall into the river. Which, with B, is one of the safest places for me. Satisfied with this plan, Cain climbed the tree and settled on one of its branches, leaning against its trunk. He then took out a blanket and draped it over himself, not used to sleeping without some coverage. I guess I should take a look at my progress, he thought, before tiredly opening the system. On the home screen, Kai looked at his current progress proudly. He hadn't had a chance to condense much spiritual power, it had still gone up by 50 to 200 SP thanks to the feedback from B. Going to BEA's status menu, he saw that her SP had increased tremendously to 405/1000 SP. Although, he had initially considered BEA's inability to independently condense spiritual power without a host to be inconvenient, he realized that it was also an opportunity to drastically improve their strength in a short time. Even the most talented beasts can only increase their spiritual power by 10 SP when not making a conscious effort. With an effort, this number can double or even triple. However, B was able to increase her spiritual power by a whopping 160 SP in just a day, worth at least a week's worth of the hard work of others. Additionally, the system GP has increased from 1/100 to 19/100 GP. If only I could come across more groups that fearlessly give chase like berserk coyotes. I would be able to achieve the upgrade in no time and become a 2-star beast tamer in no time. Sigh. There are so many stars outside of the city. Looking at the beautiful night sky, Kane closed his eyes and went to sleep. Kane continued hunting for the next 4 days. There was never as great a target as the Coyote pack, but he, B, and the system had all progressed rapidly. After the first night, he had realized that since B could not absorb spiritual power on her own, there was no need to return her to the star space. Still choosing to sleep in the same spot each night, he instead kept B in the water below him to hunt any passing fish or other aquatic creatures. Although nothing particularly powerful had been caught yet, every morning Kane would wake up to the beautiful sight of an increase in the SP of him and B, as well as GP. This arrangement allowed Kane to obtain SP and GP for 24/7. It's like getting paid a salary while sleeping. 54 seconds again. Kane said while looking at the white-grayed sand wolverine corpse in front of him. After hunting that pack of coyotes the first day, B had made rapid progress in her speed of killing the target. However, after crossing the minute mark on the third day, there has only been a little improvement until now. I guess we should get started on our mission now, Kane thought. He had already swam across the river on the 4th day in the wilderness. Although extremely tiring, he didn't run into any danger with B surrounding him and no particularly strong creatures swimming by. Kane pulled out the map given to him by the blacksmith. I'm not too far from their location. He left the wolverine corpse behind and moved forward. He didn't have enough room in the space ring for any more material since he needed to put in 3 large armadillo shells. Also, the materials from the wolverine were less valuable than the other parts he's collected so far, so he didn't feel particularly hurt by their loss. Ah! How things have changed. The boy who used to bend over backwards to earn a bit of money is now just leaving money on the ground, he said, sounding quite smug. Finally arriving at the indicated location, Kane found it empty. They were living creatures, so he did anticipate them moving. However, he wasn't in a rush to get to this location when he first entered the wilderness because armadillos are pretty timid, and once they find a location they feel safe and they may not leave for life. Kane looked around and noticed what looked like fresh animal prints in the ground. Therefore, he decided to find a comfortable spot where he could continuously see this location, since they probably just left recently to find food. His assumption was correct. Not even 15 minutes later a family of 5 arrived. One, the largest, was probably a male and was as tall as Kane's waist. The 3 slightly smaller ones were probably females. Following at the end was an obvious infant, so small he could easily carry it in his arms. Kane continued to watch. Ideally, when he got the chance, he could stab the male with the spear before it curled up and became defensive. All of the adult armadillos went behind a large rock, leaving the baby behind. Soon a variety of noises, that Kane really didn't want to think about the reason for, began to be heard from behind the rock. Kane's hands began to itch with renewed determination to stab into the male armadillo. He was completely enraged with his sensibilities as a modern man from 21st century Earth by the depraved activities of the foursome. Yes, my sense of decency is what makes me want to punish that despicable armadillo, no other reason. Unable to stand any more the passionate noises that kept drifting to him, Kane ran behind the rock and stabbed forward. Despite catching the armadillos at an especially vulnerable time, they still managed to fully curl up within the second of one spotting of him. Clang! His spear hit the back of the shell without even leaving a mark. Clang, clang, clang. He tried giving a full blow to all of them with no success. Damn, your defense really is strong, Kane said in amazement. Seeing that he wasn't having any success breaking through, Kane decided to remove the cartridge filled with decontaminated water and poured it onto the shell, hoping that there may be some minuscule opening in the shell that B could take advantage of. After 5 minutes of waiting and receiving no indication from B of a successful infection, he knew that Plan B had failed. Time to go with Plan C. Kane began to roll the male armadillo towards the water. Thankfully, with renewed confidence in its defense, it still stayed curled up. Once by the shore, he sent B into the water and pushed the armadillo in. Let's see how you stay curled up when you need to swim. After all, as land animals they were unable to breathe underwater. He will need to uncurl to swim to the surface eventually. Kane went back to where the others were. All were still curled up where he left them. Yeah, your defense is tough. But having too much confidence in it being able to protect you from everything will be your downfall. He rolled 2 more adults into the water. He thought about getting rid of all 4 adults, but he barely had enough room in the space ring for 3 adult shells. Also, since living things cannot enter space rings and he really had no way of carrying an infant across the river to sell in the city, he decided to leave one of the adult females behind to take care of it. Standing next to the shore, Kane sensed that they were unable to stay curled up under the water after 10 minutes, allowing for B to infect them. Less than a minute later, the bodies of the 2 females floated to the surface. Ding. Host has killed 2 white-grade spiritual beasts, obtaining 2 GP*. Kane dragged the bodies to shore to avoid them being taken away by the river. After 5 more minutes, Kane still did not receive a notification about the male. He never used any skills, so I was unable to see the color of his spiritual power, but I guess he had already upgraded to red-grade spiritual power. Kane jumped into the river and found it writhing in pain as it tried to swim to the surface for air. Kane stabbed it through the head. Ding. Host has killed 1 red-grade spiritual beast, obtaining 5 GP*. Kane dragged the heavy body to shore and began to take the shells off all 3 bodies. Ugh. Kane realized that he had stuffed the ring to the brim and was unable to fit the male shell. He removed some of the least valuable materials from the space, and stuffed them in a backpack so that he could fit the armadillo. He had planned to do so right before entering the city anyway to avoid raising suspicion that he had a space ring, plus none of these materials he felt were valuable enough to try and rob him. The only downside was that now he'd have to swim back across the river with a heavy load on his back. Thankfully, the return trip home, while exhausting, was uneventful. He was able to sell all of the materials except the 3 shells for the blacksmith and obtained a whopping 183,000 CD, half of which was from the bronze quality, red-grade berserk coyote pack leader he had hunted the first day. All of the other materials were not even worth as much as the white-grade cougar fur he had sold the first time he went into the wilderness. Seeing that it was bright enough out for the blacksmith shop to still be open, he headed over there. However, upon entering he did not see the large man who gave him the task. Instead, there was an almost as large teenager cashing out a customer. Once the other customer left, he turned to Kane. "How may I help you?" he said with a practiced sales smile. I had received a task from a large man with a beard previously. "I'm here to turn it in," Kane said, embarrassed that he had forgotten to get the man's name previously or even look for it on the contract they had signed. Suddenly the young worker's face turned solemn. "So you were the one that teacher gave away my spear to?" Kane shifted nervously as the large teenager marched to within a foot of him while staring him down. "Don't tell me that he is the apprentice." Kane flinched when he saw the other's hand reach toward him and stroke the spear. "How is it? Any flaws in the design? Did the sigil work as intended? Once filled with liquid, how much does the weight change?" He shot rapid-fire questions at Kane with his eyes yearning for feedback. "That, the spear is really good," he replied dumbfoundedly. "Can I please turn in my mission now?" Yes. Sorry. I will go and get teacher now." Moments later, the large man that he was familiar with came from a back room. "I'm glad you didn't dawdle with the mission," he said while holding out his hand for the ring. Kane parted with it reluctantly. The man nodded in appreciation when he looked at the quality of the shells. "Thankfully whatever poison you used did not have any corroding effects on the shell. I'm satisfied with your surface, so you can keep the spear." Leaving Kane with those words, he marched back into the back room. The teenager rubbed his head in embarrassment. "Sorry about teacher. He usually doesn't have much patience for conversation when he has work on his mind." Kane was suddenly curious. "Do you know what he plans to make?" The teen blushed. "He actually plans to make a full body armor for me. I am taking the Beast Tamer admissions test for Starfire College next month." "Oh. Good luck," Kane said, surprised. There were very few students with an affinity highly rated enough to take the test. Not to mention he also is an extremely talented blacksmith. "Are you planning to give up blacksmithing? Or will you be entering a double major also?" "I would like to do both if I can. I am confident in entering the blacksmithing department, but I only have a B-rated affinity and could use a little extra luck for the Beast Tamer test. Wait. Also. Yeah. I plan to also enter as a double major. Beast taming and evolutionary planning." The other teen looked like he had seen a monster. Someone was trying to enter both of the most competitive and rigorous departments in the college. Maybe he's planning to enter a low-tier college, he thought while calming down. Are you also planning to try out for Starfire College? No, I can't, replied Kane. The teen sighed in relief. Yeah, it'd be a little too abnormal to enter both departments at a top 5 college. That'd mean you'd need at least a B-rated affinity. I'm planning to take the exam for Dark Moon College, and with the 3 days it takes to travel each way to and from the eastern region by train, I would have missed the Starfire exam by then. Most qualified students could only choose 1 or 2 exams to take due to the close timing of all the dates and the several days it could take to travel between them by the interregional train. Although students with extremely strong elders would easily be able to meet all exam dates if flying on a blue grade or stronger spiritual beast. If Kane did not pass the Dark Moon College exam, he would have to pick between Supernova College and the First Central Academy to have another shot at entering a top 5 college. The other teenager began to doubt life at Kane's words. Dark Moon College, one of the top 5 colleges, that's very impressive, good luck. Thanks. You too. It's equally impressive that you are planning to enter 2 departments at Starfire as well. They aren't the same, you monster. He shouted internally. What's your name? He asked, figuring it couldn't hurt to get to know someone that ambitious. Kane. You. Phenios. Well, good luck Phenios, and thanks for the spear. Hopefully the next time we meet is as students of Dark Moon and Starfire, he said before waving goodbye and exiting the store. Kane's encounter with Phenios served as a huge reminder to him. Not only would students be competing during the exam in terms of talent, but also money and background. Not only high quality and expensive contracts but also expensive weapons and armor. Heck, students with Beast Tamer family members would just benefit greatly from the combat knowledge and survival tips provided to them, while Kane had to fumble through the do's and don't for survival on his own. Some students with more of a background may even be taught spiritual power techniques, which others would only get a chance to learn once in college. Obviously, not only spiritual creatures can utilize their spiritual power to perform skills. There are a variety of skills that humans can also use to amplify their contract's strengths or fight alongside them. Unfortunately, those skills are not taught in high school classrooms. One can only learn them in a beast taming major at a university. The quality of the skills one can learn also differs by the library catalog of each school. This is just one of the reasons why Kane is so desperate to enter both majors at a top 5 college, rather than just testing into the planner major. Someone with no background like him, and an affinity as unique as his, needs to get 10x out of his college experience than a legacy would need to. I can't afford to take it easy. I need to make up for the gap in combat knowledge by myself out there. I have a decent soft armor and weapon now, but I'm sure others will have much better. If I completely clear my savings after hunting a few more times, I could probably get an enchanted armor as well. It is rare for 1-stars to be able to support the spiritual power drainage of 2 enchanted equipment, but by the time of the exam I should be able to become a 2-star beast tamer with red spiritual power. Although it is unlikely I could find a suitable contract before the exam to improve my odds even more. However, if I hurry to upgrade the system, maybe I can find something that will help me pass the exam. With only 3 weeks left until the academic exam and 4 weeks until the Dark Moon Beast Tamer exam, it is crunch time. Kane immediately started to jog home, wanting to even save the few minutes it'd take to walk home for something more important, like studying or training. Thankfully, he arrived back home in time for dinner. However, he was surprised to not find Bridge anywhere. Where is Bridge? He never misses dinner. Kane asked while sitting down. This time nobody made a fuss over his return, seeming to have grown accustomed to it. One of the trainers at the Wolfblood Dojo took a liking to him and has been helping him train. Apparently, it's been a couple of years since a student in the city with a B-rated or higher affinity that can bind wolves has appeared, the director said. He seems even more passionate about getting Bridge into one of the top 5 colleges and spreading their dojo's name than even Bridge himself. Kane felt immediate relief. With his current training plan, he really didn't have any time to spare to help Bridge train, nor could he provide guidance as well as a training center meant specifically for those contracted to wolves. Despite Bridge never saying so directly, he's not unaware of Bridge's desire to enter the same college as him, and he also would love the same. With Bridge receiving professional guidance, Kane could now focus solely on his own training. Stomach full, he went upstairs to lay in bed. Let's take a look at my current progress. Let's see. My own spiritual power has finally crossed the halfway point at 513 SP, although BEA's feedback did most of the work. B is much higher at 745 SP, while I am more than halfway to the system upgrade with 57 GP. Sigh. Cain really wanted to sleep, but he knew that he should continue condensing his own spiritual power. His has grown at a fast rate thanks to B, but there are benefits to doing the hard work yourself. When condensing the spiritual energy, your control over the force also gradually increases. This is extremely beneficial when attempting to condense your next star. Additionally, fine control over spiritual power is absolutely necessary when attempting to learn spiritual power techniques. Cain uncovered the skylight above his bed, a feature of all homes of the Celestial Empire, to all the efficient absorption of spiritual power from the stars. Technically, spiritual power could be absorbed from the environment or all manner of other things depending on the method used. For example, BEA's ability to absorb spiritual power from the brains of her hosts. However, within the Celestial Empire, the spiritual power condensation method taught to all citizens from birth utilizes the stars. Although I heard that there are other countries with different methods of absorbing spiritual power. All had their pros and cons. Maybe I will find a method that suits me better in the future. However, this method has been the one that their country has been built upon, a cultivation road already paved by the greats that came before him. Cain did not feel too tired, although he got no sleep last night. It may be due to his improved constitution as his strength increases. I heard that high-level beast tamers eventually don't even need sleep. 541 SP, an almost 30 SP increase in one night, not bad. Cain moved his eyes to his hands while concentrating. Eventually a pink glow began to appear in his palms. My control over my spiritual power has also improved. I wouldn't have been able to manifest my spiritual power outside my body so quickly in the past. He thought, reasserting his decision to condense spiritual energy for himself. Although the system hasn't shown me much help yet, it sure is handy having an exact measurement of spiritual power for B and I. Thinking of the brilliant pink hue that just came out of his hands. Most people, without the precise instruments usually available only at colleges and rich households that could afford them, would have to base their progress completely off of the gradual shift in the color of their spiritual power. Then they'd have to continue absorbing without knowing exactly how close they are until they feel the bottleneck, unable to absorb any more. At which point it will be time to condense their next star. Now that there were no longer any stars in the sky, Cain jumped up and headed into town. Before leaving into the wilderness again, there was something he desperately wanted to buy. Cain walked out of the store in embarrassment. He had wanted to buy a space ring after feeling its usefulness the last time he went out. Figuring that his now six-figure savings should be able to at least buy him one of the smallest ones. He was wrong. Very wrong. He wouldn't even have the courage to come back here without 10 million CD at least in his account. I hadn't expected that blacksmith to be so rich. Cain muttered. A ring with a similar space as was given to him previously would cost at least 21 million CD. That's more than most ordinary families make in a lifetime. Enough to run the orphanage for decades. However, he didn't want to immediately give up. There was still his plan B. Cain walked over to his new friend's shop. "Hey Fenios buddy." Cain yelled shamelessly upon entering the shop. The large team looked at Cain strangely. Buddy. They'd only met yesterday. At most they were acquaintances. Never one for small talk, Cain cut straight to the chase. "I was wondering if I could possibly use your teacher's space ring again." "Of course, I won't just borrow it, I'll pay to rent it." "I'll go ask him," he replied, not sure what to make of the sudden request. They aren't exactly a rental store. Within moments he walked back out with a puzzled expression and a familiar ring in his hands. Seeing the ring, Cain was hopeful. Teacher agreed to your request. However, he set the rate at 15,000 CD per day, payment up front, no bargaining. 15,000 CD. Thanks to the money I made my last venture into the wilderness, I could afford to rent it for 12 days, a little shorter than I had hoped. To maximize efficiency, he had hoped to spend almost the entire 3 weeks leading up to the academic entrance test in the wilderness, to avoid spending time going back and forth. Now he will have to come back more than a week sooner than planned. However, beggars can't be choosers. He'd also be able to bring more materials back with him and, as a result, earn more money. Wincing in pain, Cain nodded in agreement. After signing a contract and making the full payment for 12 days and paying 180,000 CD with tears pooling in his eyes, he left the shop. He now only had a little more than 5,000 CD to his name, which he used to restock on food and supplies. He didn't buy a replacement tent. Sleeping outside in the tree will be more beneficial now that he's decided to take his condensation of spiritual power at night seriously. After stuffing everything he would need into the ring and filling a decoy bag with some snacks, Cain once again left for the wilderness. 10 days later. After being in the wilderness for 10 days and continuously hunting 3 to 5 white-grade beasts a day, he and B were approaching a bottleneck. Both he and B had passed the 900 SP mark, sitting at 907 and 935 SP respectively. However, the spiritual power that would increase greatly each day began to plateau after they had passed 900 SP. Now, BEA's SP, similar to the system, was only increasing by 1 or 2 points with each white-grade beast. Similarly, after a night of long work, Cain may only have his spiritual power increase by around 5 points. However, despite the no longer rapid progress, Cain was currently ecstatic. He looked down lovingly at the white spider corpse below him, a venom spinner, extremely toxic among bronze-quality spiritual beasts. Thankfully, it was still young and had not reached red grade yet. Anyways, the reason he was staring at the spider with such affection was not due to any strange inclinations, but rather because its death had allowed him to achieve one of his major goals. He had finally accumulated enough GP to upgrade the system. Finally. System. Upgrade. *ding. Sensing the host's intention to consume all available GP to upgrade the system. In order to complete the upgrade, the system will be unavailable for 24 hours. Do you still wish to proceed? Yes. It's not as though when you are available you are that useful anyways. Cain muttered. Decision confirmed. Initializing system upgrade *. I hope after the upgrade you can increase my chances of passing the exam. While waiting for the system to upgrade, Cain decided to sit and catch his breath before continuing to hunt. Russell. Although the spider had only been a child, it was much more challenging to defeat than even the average red-grade spiritual creature. Russell. Cain began to slowly dissect the spider for the materials that were valuable. Its poison sac alone is probably the most valuable thing he had obtained since entering the forest. Skitter scuttle. If it has been from a fully adult red-grade venom spinner, then he would have easily obtained over 7 figures worth of CD with 1 kill. Cain went still while focusing on his hearing. He was alarmed. Not by what he heard, but by the complete absence of any sounds around him. Usually there would be a variety of sounds caused by living things moving and communicating with one another in the forest. But now, nothing. The only time an entire areas would turn silent like this was if an apex predator was in the vicinity. Cain immediately turned to run away when he heard it. Scree. In front of him was a spider several times his size, staring at him with glowing red eyes. Eyes that flicked back and forth in anger between him and the dead spider at his feet. I'm screwed. When Cain had obtained a map with the known locations of the most dangerous spiritual creatures in the forest, he had made a conscious decision to give all of their territories a wide berth. So please tell me why an orange-grade spiritual beast is here. The white widow spider was likely the mother of the partially dissected venom spinner at his feet. Cain wanted to cry, the corpse he was looking at with affection before now a source of resentment. Why the hell did you run so far away from home? If you want to be a naughty child, don't drag me down with you. Cain would have kicked the corpse in anger if its mother was not staring him down currently. I need to distract it and get out of here. What can I use to delay it for even just a few seconds? Although it pained Cain to damage his valuable prize after a long battle, he had already obtained the most valuable poison sac, and his life was more precious than any materials. He took a lighter from his space ring, as well as some otter fur covered in oils. I had found the river otter's fur to be oily and gross when I first obtained it. Now it may just save my life. He put the match to the fur and quickly tossed it on the spider corpse at his feet before dashing away. Scree. As the spider dashed forward to try and put out the flames covering its child, Cain immediately ran towards his destination. Not the river like usual, he had wandered further away from it as he hunted and he'd probably get caught before getting there. Instead, he ran towards the caves he had first found Bee in. The walls of the tunnels, although spacious to Cain, it should not be able to fit inside. Entering what was originally his exit after finding Bee, Cain took out a flashlight and dashed towards the very first cavern that the turtle had dropped him at. It was the only other exit he knew of. Although he didn't think he was a strong enough swimmer to leave through there previously, he had no other choice now. Hopefully, his improved physique due to the contract and higher spiritual power would be enough to get him away. Crash. Seconds after entering, Cain could hear that the spider had also arrived at the entrance of the tunnel. From the sounds of it, she was trying to forcefully squeeze her body in, even if it risked collapsing the tunnel on them both. So fast. Despite getting a huge head start, I only arrived here seconds before she did. Thankfully, squeezing into the tunnel also slowed her down greatly, allowing Cain to remain just out of her reach. When Cain saw the light from the cavern up ahead, he pumped his legs even harder, before dashing into the pool of water, narrowly missing the swipe from a leg behind him as he leaped. Despite only the air from the attack reaching him, he still got blown further away from the shore like a kite. It was beneficial because he was able to open up some distance instantly. He was sure that if hit directly, even with the soft armor, his organs would have turned into mush. Cain began to swim deeper, looking for the opening to the river that first must have been how he entered. I can't see. The light from the opening in the ceiling was no longer reaching the deep into the water. However, he didn't dwell on his lack of sight for long and released Bee into the water. Hopefully, one of her splits will get dragged into the current of the river and Bee will be able to direct him there. Now was a race against time. Will Bee find the opening before he has to go up for air? He could already see the spider, despite its huge size, standing on the surface of the water like some kind of deity. Therefore, he doesn't dare to swim up any higher. As his lungs were beginning to burn, the white widow stabbed one of its legs towards him like a lance. The water offered barely any obstruction at all. Is this the power of an orange-grade spiritual creature? Cain thought, terrified. What about those even more powerful? Cain swam to the side to dodge the blow, but a glance from the blow was enough to damage several of his ribs. The little remaining air in his lungs was immediately pushed out as he gave a silent scream of pain. For the first time, Cain felt an emotion from Bee. Anxiety. Determination. Both. It was hard to identify the emotion, especially since he wasn't used to receiving any emotional feedback through the contract. In the second that the spider dipped its head under the water to extend its reach towards him, Bee's true body, not a split, had managed to enter its body. However, according to the system description, it likely wouldn't do any good. The limit of Bee's abilities was to affect red-grade spiritual creatures. Still, Bee made her way toward the spider's brain. What the heck? I'll die if I don't try anything anyways. He could feel darkness creeping into the edges of his vision from the lack of oxygen. Through the contract, Cain channeled his spiritual power to Bee in a crude manner. If he had learned a suitable spiritual power technique, he maybe would have been able to momentarily increase Bee's spiritual power in a more effective and efficient way. However, until he entered college, this was his only option. Cain, after nearly exhausting all of his spiritual energy and oxygen, quickly surfaced after receiving a signal from Bee. He took a sweet gulp of air while focusing his eyes on the massive spider. Its eyes were clouded over while its front two legs were trembling. However, that only lasted for a moment before its vision cleared and focused on Cain. Scree! Cain could almost feel its anger that the murderer of its child dared to show himself again. He quickly swam back down below the surface. Fortunately, right at this moment Cain received a prompt from Bee that one of her splits had exited the cavern as well as the direction it had last been. Once he located the opening in the wall, just large enough to fit a full-grown man, he made his exit. While recalling Bee from the spider's body and, consequently, all of her splits. Scree! Smash, smash, smash. All that remained in the cavern were the enraged screams of the spider mother as she attempted to smash out of the cavern. Cain wasn't completely out of danger yet. He immediately re-released Bee into the water to scout in front of him and also to deal with any potential threats. Now he needed to leave this network of tunnels before his limited oxygen ran out. Due to the lack of light, he swam where prompted based on what BEA splits conveyed to him of the surrounding environment. Just when he was about to lose the last of his oxygen, he sensed an opening and spent the last of his energy moving through it and then to the light he saw at the surface of the water. Ha, ha. Ah. The deep breaths of air he took were immediately released in a loud scream as he reveled in surviving such a severe near-death experience. Just about the last of his energy spent, he decided to float on his back and slowly backstroke towards shore. By the time he reached shore, he had regained enough energy to run back to the city. He couldn't possibly stay out here with an orange-grade spiritual beast on the lookout for him. He also should probably warn others leaving the city that the information regarding the Spider Mother was no longer accurate and it was wandering outside of its territory. Looking for him, but they didn't need to know that. Once in the city, he went towards the information broker that he had originally bought the danger-marked map from and informed him of the spider he ran into as well as its last known location. Thank you for the information. It's strange that the White Widow would suddenly be outside of its territory when it's never left in nearly a decade. I will send a 3-star mercenary to go check it out. Yeah, super weird. Kane said, I wonder why it left. Anyways, I gotta go. He quickly rushed away with a sigh of relief that more questions weren't asked and he no longer had to have the potential death of an unprepared mercenary on his conscience. Now he could do his favorite part of going into the wilderness, coming back and making money. The 10 days he had spent in the wild had been immensely beneficial. Not only getting to upgrade the system, but also stuffing the space ring to the brim with materials, including a rare venom spinner poison sac. After bargaining for nearly an hour over every piece of material, Kane managed to obtain nearly 500,000 CD, 493k CD, to be exact. Nearly half of which was completely due to the poison sac. Although he had nearly died for it, he had no regrets while staring at the new balance on his ID card. Those that say money can't buy happiness clearly did not have enough of it, he thought, while crying tears of joy. What should I do with my remaining 2 days with the ring? The contract already said that there'd be no refunds if returned early. But knowing that an orange-grade spider was hunting for him specifically, he did not dare to step into the wilderness again so soon. At least not until he received news of it being hunted by one of the stronger members of the city. Unfortunately, as a small city, the strongest individuals in the Bright Star City may only have a contract at the orange grade, making it quite risky to hunt the incredibly poisonous White Widow spider. Even if a group of 3-star level beast tamers got together and defeated it, they would likely suffer devastating losses. However, even if the recent progress of Kane and B was slow, Kane really couldn't afford to waste even a day not training if he wanted both him and B to have red-grade spiritual power by the time of the Dark Moon exam. After the chase with the White Widow, there were still 16 hours left until the system upgrade was finished. Maybe he'd have a solution to some of his problems by tomorrow. Kane decided to spend his unanticipated downtime studying for the academic exam in only 11 days. Although he often performs at the top of his school and even the top 1% in the nation, the test to enter the planner major may be even more difficult than the beast taming major. All students not entering a beast taming major, including those without an affinity and those with an affinity too low rated to enter a college program, will take the academic exam. Meaning that over 90% of high school seniors out of nearly 1 million graduates will be taking this test. Being in the top 1% of 1 million is really not that high when you broke down the numbers, being in the top 10,000. To be confident of entering the most selective academic major at a top 5 college, he would need to at least be in the top 500. Assuming that 100 planners are admitted to each school per year. However, to have his pick of which college he could go to, he would at least need to be in the top 100, anything lower is risky. Based on previous year's exam results, to get a ranking that high he would be allowed at most 1 wrong question. Currently, during his best performance, he gave 2 wrong answers, and on average he gives 4 to 5. Which would land him within the top 500 during his best performance, and the top 5,000 to 10,000 on average. However, Kane had an advantage compared to most applicants who have no affinity or are not focusing on increasing their spiritual power to become a professional beast tamer. In addition to the benefits to his constitution, a higher spiritual power also has benefits on his mental strength, improving such aspects as memory, concentration, and calculation speed. After all, at very high levels, where dozens of moves may be exchanged in a single second, the importance of greater mental strength is great. He also felt the difference when he was studying. Textbook pages that would previously have taken him a whole day to memorize were now memorized in an hour or less. His arithmetic and problem-solving ability also greatly improved. Suddenly full of confidence, Kane took out one of the practice exams Mr. Evergreen had given to him before he was excused from classes. This was the exam given 2 years ago. The questions started off easy. If given the choice among these 4 spiritual creatures, which would be the most optimal choice for defeating an opponent with a burning scarab beetle? A. Vapor Gator. B. Magmite. C. Mistode. D. Glacé Deer. Well, despite its name, the burning scarab beetle is an ice attribute, bug-type spiritual creature, meaning that it has a double weakness to fire. The reason for its name is due to its bites that cause a frostbite so severe it feels as though your skin is scalding off. A bit of a trick question, but anyone who studied should be able to answer it correctly. Who of the 5 founders did not have a known gift? A. Callista Ira. B. Leopold Storm. C. Evan Blackheart. D. Casimir Lysander. E. Amos Sands. E. His last name practically gives it away. Given that T is a real number, and that F, X, is as shown in the equation below, then please calculate for K. Even math, which was previously my weakness, isn't giving me much trouble now. After answering a variety of questions about spiritual creatures, history, math, geography, and science, Kane used the answer key to tally up his score. 498 out of 500. Even without intensive studying and spending most of my time focusing on increasing my strength, I've already managed to match my previous best score. Kane was suddenly filled with confidence. Forget aiming for the top 100, I want to be one of the few with a perfect score. Kane picked up a geography textbook, the source of his 2 incorrect answers, and was about to continue studying when. Ding. System update completed. Yes. Please have something good. With anticipation, Kane opened up the home screen and tried to find any differences. System, can you maybe give me a tour of your new features? He eventually decided after nothing different stood out to him. Of course, host. The system now has 3 new functions. Firstly, the System Shop, where you can exchange GP you don't want to use on system upgrades for rare items. The contents of the shop will refresh every week. Filled with anticipation, Kane immediately went to the shop and saw 3 items available for sale. An object that looked like a blank red playing card, a vial filled with a blue liquid, and an object that looked like a fishing net. He focused on each object so that the description could appear. Red Grade Condensation Card. This card lowers the difficulty of a beast tamer successfully condensing their 2nd star. 300 GP. D-Level Mental Strength Elixir, can increase the user's mental strength by 30% for 3 hours. Note, only effective for those red grade spiritual power and below. 100 GP. D-Level Capture Net, can ensure that anything with red grade or lower spiritual power will be trapped and unable to escape without the user's wishes. 250 GP. Not bad, but everything is pretty expensive. It'll already took Kane weeks to reach the 100 GP required to upgrade the system. He also wasn't sure how necessary any of these objects would be in his immediate future. The mental strength elixir may be useful for the academic exam. However, with how he performed on the last practice test, he already felt confident that with the 2 weeks remaining to study, he could rank safely in the top 100. The elixir is an unnecessary expense. For the net, Kane doesn't need it currently, although there may be some capture missions for specific spiritual beasts once he enters college where it'll be useful. His immediate concern is to actually enter college. As for the red grade condensation card, Kane wanted it, but he wasn't sure if he could afford it. There were risks to condensing a new star. Thankfully, both the 1st and 2nd stars did not have severe repercussions for failure. However, failure higher levels at higher levels may result in permanently damaged mental strength, having your ability to condense spiritual power crippled, or death. At Kane's level, the consequence for failing would likely not be more than a terrible headache and the inability to use spiritual power for a week to a month. So close to the exam, he would prefer not to take the risk of failing. However, with the resources available to him with his newfound wealth, and the guidance from teachers at his school, he believes that his chance of failure should be extremely low. Sigh. Looks like I'll have to wait until next week to see if anything useful refreshes. However, even if it does, I won't be able to obtain the GP to afford it while that white widow spider is out there looking for me. Wait. I thought you said there were 3 new functions. Kane asked, suddenly hopeful that there will be something he needs. Asterisk correct. The second feature unlocked by the system is the Celestial Planetarium asterisk. A planetarium. Not what I was expecting. Kane accessed the screen for the planetarium, and instead of a screen appearing before him, he was suddenly transported to a room that made it appear as though he was floating in a sea of stars. Asterisk this is the Celestial Planetarium. It was tailored towards the host's current spiritual power condensation method asterisk. If the host attempts to condense spiritual power while their consciousness is in this space, you will find that your efficiency is several times greater than when outside. Kane was ecstatic. His slower rate of condensing spiritual power was one of his most pressing issues. Usually, rooms that would increase condensation efficiency were only available at colleges, and students were limited in how much they could use them. Kane now had one of those rooms in his mind at all times for free. It seems like this upgrade has greatly increased your abilities. How much can it increase my efficiency? Asterisk the ability to affect absorption will vary slightly between users. However, the system estimates that it should increase the host's absorption efficiency by 2.2x asterisk. 2.2 times, that means, rather than the 5 SP I gain after condensing spiritual power for an entire night, I should obtain around 11 points every night. With my spiritual power currently at 912 SP, I should be able to reach red grade spiritual power and condense my second star before the Dark Moon entrance test in 3 weeks. What's the third feature unlock? Kane asked in anticipation. Asterisk replying to host. The mission board is now open asterisk. Mission board. The system automatically opened up the mission board for Kane to see. Hunt 5 red grade spiritual creatures. Have at least one contract advance the red grade spiritual power. What is this? Asterisk hunting spiritual creatures is not the only method of obtaining GP. The host may also obtain GP by accomplishing missions asterisk. Kane clicked on the task to hunt 5 red grade spiritual creatures and saw that it would reward 30 points. Normally, 5 red grade spiritual creatures would give 25 GP, 5 points each. However, accomplishing the same task as a mission would increase the reward 1.2 times. Maybe I can continue to increase my GP despite not being able to go into the wilderness, Kane pondered as he scrolled down the long list of tasks. Of the ones available, there were several that already aligned with his current goals. Advancing to 2 stars, 100 GP. 1 spiritual contract advancing to red grade, 100 GP. Entering the beast taming major at a college, reward variable by college ranking. Taking the academic admissions exam, reward variable by placement. Therefore, it was reassuring to know that with this system upgrade, Kane now had a way to increase his system GP and his own spiritual power. Now the only problem is B. Even without the Celestial Planetarium, Kane's spiritual power still increases by around 5 points every night if he puts in the work, making it currently at 912 SP. However, since he'd left the wilderness, BEA's spiritual power has not increased at all. BEA's ability to absorb spiritual power directly from brains has allowed for them both to make rapid progress. Now Kane's SP is far higher than most of his peers who formed a contract days before him. But, once there are no suitable targets around to hunt, the speed of BEA's growth greatly decreases. Kane started to think back on all of the times he was in the wilderness, the fights he had, as well as even some of the relevant info in his textbooks to see if there was anything he was missing that could help B. That's when he suddenly had a crazy idea. However, it can be said that there is a fine line between genius and crazy. When Kane had first bound to B, she already had some spiritual power, indicating that she had to have already infected multiple living things, such as the mercenary that first made him go looking for her, and himself. He also happened to just receive a new method of increasing his own spiritual power absorption quickly. He was confident that B would be able to absorb spiritual power from human brains, he's just not sure if the contract would prevent her from doing so, as it would be harmful to her contractor. However, he still had some reservations. If B would end up causing long-term damage to his mental strength so close to the exams, it'd be too late to regret his decision after not being admitted to his school of choice. Although, if this plan works and I can get B to red grade spiritual power, That would accomplish one of my missions and I can afford to buy the temporary boost for mental strength. System, could you help me assess this plan's feasibility? He asked now that he had some insurance in place. He crossed his fingers that this analysis was not beyond the AI's capabilities or that another system upgrade was needed to unlock such help. Answering host. Prior to binding, the brain-eating amoeba did absorb the host's spiritual power. However, the contract's effect on this ability would need to be assessed by the host himself. Kane nodded and communicated his idea with B. At first, B seemed hesitant. However, given her simple intelligence, she quickly followed her instincts once given permission and infected Kane. Kane laid down in his bed to avoid injuring himself from falling and closed his eyes. Within 30 seconds he felt a dull ache behind his eyes. This is uncomfortable but not as bad, I thought. However, this idea quickly changed as the dull ache grew to what felt like dozens of nails being hammered into his head. Arg. Kane quickly bit onto his pillow to avoid making more noise and worrying the others in the orphanage. Kane, make sure you have those reports on my desk by next morning. The guy next door is an idiot. How could you break a $300,000 machine? That's why no lab should hire undergrads. Go away, I know none of you were real. He covered his ears to block out the hallucinations with voices from his past life as a college student, but it was useless. By the 5-minute mark, he didn't think he could remain conscious. The fact that he could even last this long was likely due to some resistance being provided to him via the contract. Alarm. It is strongly suggested that the host immediately stop his current actions. It is sense that the host's consciousness is fading. Activating forced recall of contract. The system's alarmed voice was the last thing that Kane heard before losing consciousness.